My countrymen, here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight? Fight against that? No! We will run! And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome back to the Benji and Cal podcast. This is episode 11.
12.
12 already. And we are talking about freedom. More specifically, free speech.
One of the great debates of our time.
Yes? How do you see that?
That is one of the great debates of our time.
Yeah.
It might have been in other times as well, but it does seem to me to be a big topic that people feel passionately about. There are differing views, and I think the differing views are easily understandable. It's not such a complex topic. It's people feel one way about it, or people feel another way about it. And of course, there's a spectrum in between those two things. But the basic way of understanding the debate on free speech, I think, is pretty simple, and it's accessible to everyone. Most people have an opinion on it, and it's something that has inspired a lot of passionate debates, certainly in my experience on the internet and even in real life talking to people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was definitely more of an issue in the past where, people actually wouldn't be able to say whatever they wanted because they would be instantly killed or, if we're talking medieval times, any time where you say something that is against the ruling power, it's going to be a problem. And there still are definitely societies today where you can't say that. You can't say things, you'll get disappeared, you'll never be heard from again. And it still is, better than in the past. But now it's more poignant because it's more of a debate. What does it mean to have free speech? What exactly does it entail? Unless you think it's always been that debate.
I don't know. I'm also not convinced that the state of free speech is more secure or better in some sense now than it was in the past. On the topic of free speech, I have a difficult time kind of anchoring myself in some concept of the past and having a sense of what it was like. I feel like it really depends greatly on where in the past, what context. Like, on the one hand, I'm sure there was, in a sense, less protection of free speech in the past because free speech as a right, I'm in my American education. I know that it shows up in the American Constitution. I'm sure it shows up at least in some form before that. But I wonder. I doubt it was really enshrined in law long before that. But at the same time, there was less opportunity to catch people. You weren't people didn't have their phones recording all the time. You couldn't no one could dig up old tweets of 20 years ago and say look at what you said 20 years ago, you bigot. That just wouldn't happen. Of course, there was no way that could happen. So there was, in a sense, less protection, but also less risk, I think, and less ability for the people who don't respect free speech to catch you and to to punish you for your speech.
So there's less risk, a higher cost. Nowadays, more risk, lower cost in terms of not, costing your life, not, leading to lifelong imprisonment, flogging, whatever it is.
Well, I
Depends on where you live.
yeah,
but
I think there have been cases not in America, but in England. I think there have been cases where people have been imprisoned for what is basically what should be protected under free speech. I'm speaking like the name that comes to mind is Tommy Robinson. Although disclosure, I don't really know the things that happened in that case, but I have this sense that I've heard of things happening.
Right. I was more referring to, countries like China, Iran, Russia, where you actually would go to the gulag, to somewhere really never be seen again. At least in England, yeah. What was the case there exactly that someone spoke?
I mean, we'd have to look it up because I'm afraid of spreading false information.
Right. But just in general, what do you remember what he said? Or
I don't remember what he said. I remember that he got in trouble because the court basically told him he can no longer say the things he's saying.
what's his name?
Tommy Robinson.
Tommy
Pretty sure that's his name.
Robinson.
I did get into a bit of a debate with a British guy about it back in college, and he did send me some sources that made me a little bit rethink, at least amend my position about it. So I grant it's more complex than just a guy was in prison for saying something.
Mm-hmm. But he specifically is an anti-Islam campaigner.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely he said something anti-Islam, maybe anti-Muhammad, or
Probably.
So the biggest problem, I think, is twofold. One, what is the definition of free speech?
Well, so right now you're going to give your understanding of free speech and your kind of basic opinion about when speech should be free and what kind of restrictions should be on speech or expression, and I'll do the same. We'll hash it out from there.
Okay. So my understanding is that, of course, it's easy for all of us to say, yeah, free speech, of course. You got to let people talk. You got to let people say stuff, even if you don't like it. Okay. Yeah. And, you got to let people say things that might be offensive. I think that's what it means, and that you have to do your best to allow people to communicate their opinions, because otherwise you wind up with some draconian government that could some ruling group that refuses to let people say what they want to say, anything that goes against them, and then you don't really have the freedom to do what you want. Ultimately, you can't discuss and the dangers that this authoritarian power represents, because it's not letting you say things. Where it goes wrong, and which is not wrong, but where it gets controversial, is when what you're saying is incitement or calling for violence, calling for harm, leading to violence, leading to harm. And what that means exactly is pretty subjective. It can be. And I think there are cases where we'd all agree where that's the case, where whether it's yelling fire in a crowded theater is the classic example of, something you're not allowed to do. Even though it's just speech, you're just saying making, at the end of the day, audible noises with your breath. How could that possibly lead to violence? Well, there are some cases where it does. If you're saying, we should go murder all of this specific group of people, you shouldn't be allowed to say that. I think there are very few, well, I don't know exact numbers. There are probably free speech purists which would say, I could say whatever I want, because as long as I'm not actually doing any harm, then, it's just audio signals at the end. It's just gusts of air. I'm not stabbing anyone. So there are people that would say that that's fine, to even call, for people to die and saying things like that. I don't know if you're a free speech purist, but I think most people in the world, the general consensus is that, we're not free speech purists. It's important to keep speech free, but it's also important to not incite violence. And then it becomes a question, okay, what constitutes incitement to violence? So everyone really agrees in theory with free speech. Where they disagree is when what they say constitutes violence, and if it does, then that should be prevented.
So that was good. Now just here, should I? I'll try to steelman what you just said. Is that fine?
Sure, okay. Steelman meaning you're going to take what I said, make it harder to attack.
Well, I'm gonna give it the most favorable summary that I can. Meaning, I'm not gonna straw man you. I'm gonna steelman you. I'm gonna.
Well, why would you want to do that?
For the sake of understanding, I just want to make sure I understood you.
Right,
So
and we'll give more examples in the future, soon.
okay, fine. Yeah, we're gonna go a lot more into it. There was a lot that Benji said that I'm gonna go into. So your position is free speech speech should be generally free, and everyone pretty much agrees with that in principle. It's just that speech that leads to violence or incites violence, either of those, or do you want to choose incites over leads?
It's kind of a subjective thing because I guess I would say incites violence, and then given a specific example, I would say, yeah, that's inciting violence when it really means leading to it. It depends what you mean, I guess, by inciting and what the difference is between. Is the difference explicit calling for violence versus implicit? Or is it
the difference
a complete byproduct happens to be...
That's what I was thinking. The difference was that you are intending to incite violence by saying, hey, all you people go and murder those other people. Or people interpreted your words, or later people committed violence and said, well, I was inspired by this guy's words, but at the time you were like, no, I did not intend for anybody to...
Right. Well, I don't like the term intention because no one really knows what someone's intention is, and they could always deny it. So the only metric I would use is what they actually said. And then, depending on the specific example, some cases, I guess, person A would interpret something, the same thing, as incitement, and person B would say, no, that's just a comment. He's not actually inciting.
The judgment about whether something is incitement is from the perspective of the listener. We don't try to put ourselves in the shoes of the speaker, and we kind of say like, oh, does a reasonable person listening to these words think that it is incitement to violence, or does he think that it's just an expression of an opinion?
Right, and it's not ideal for obvious reasons of subjectivity, but that I feel is the best we could do.
Okay.
And it obviously leads to, conflicts and disagreement.
To clarify this one point, in my position on free speech, I would say that free speech has two protections in the case of incitement to violence. One is a reasonable person listening to the words has to think that, yeah, that's inciting violence. That's not just expressing an idea. And from the speaker's perspective, it's not about intention, but he has to have a reasonable idea that his words will lead to violence. Meaning, if from his perspective, he has reasonable doubt that what I'm saying has no chance of leading to violence, even if his words can be interpreted as inciting to violence, I would still say that that's fine. I'll get more into that. I also
meaning he has to know ahead of time whether his words are going to have such an effect.
It's kind of the same standard.
If he was reasonable.
Well, it's how do we know that he knows? It's the same sort of standard when it comes to like criminal negligence or manslaughter that leads to someone's death. You kind of have to just sort of put yourself in the shoes of a sort of reasonable person in a situation. Like, should you have been aware that your negligence in that situation, or your lack of awareness, or your decision making in that situation could possibly lead to someone's death? That's kind of the standard when it comes to manslaughter or third degree murder, I think. It's a similar
An example would be like, I'm waving around a knife, I
Right.
should know.
You should know that that is the dangerous thing to do, and if that hits somebody, that could cut an artery, and that could...
Versus if I accidentally knock a knife with my elbow, it falls off the table, kills someone, that would be... So the first case would be involuntary manslaughter, or it would be second-degree murder? Is there such a thing?
There is such a thing. I don't have in my head right now the exact distinctions between third-degree murder.
There would be different degrees. The penalty would be less severe.
Yeah. But if it's a total accident, if a reasonable person in your situation would have no suspicion that what you were doing at that time could possibly lead to someone's death, and it was really just like something fluky happened, then it's not any degree murder. You might not be liable at all, depending on the situation, of course.
Okay, but again, it still comes down to reasonability. A jury of your peers to decide whether it is reasonable.
Yeah, there's actually a third thing, though, that has to happen, which is that it actually had to have led to violence. If you just say something inflammatory that somebody might interpret as inciting to violence, but nothing actually came of it, I don't think that should be prosecuted. That is to say that the speech itself is not actually wrong. It only becomes a problem when it led to something bad, and then we can kind of retroactively say, like, well, you incited violence.
Interesting. I mean, I guess, it wouldn't be a problem if nothing actually came of it, but yeah, you'd have to somehow show later on. What happens if you said something now and then, like, in a few years or something, it comes back and, oh, someone actually did happen to stab someone?
Well, the longer amount of time that happens between a criminal act, and your words, the harder it would be to argue that your words inspired that. But yeah, there's no. I'm not really speaking from knowledge of the law here. I'm speaking kind of with my intuition of what the law should be, my intuition of what kind of protections around free speech there should be. But my intuition would say that, yeah, there's no real like statute of limitations here. Like in theory, if in 1,000 years somebody commits murder based on your words, and there is a clear connection, maybe you could kind of retroactively say, like, I mean, you're kind of inciting.
Let's sue all of these religious figures who wrote down,
All right, I really disagree with that.
No, I'm saying if, yeah.
You're saying in the scenario that
that
I'm painting here. Now, obviously, I think that like once 1,000 years pass by, like you'd have to have a super strong case to.
But there'd be no one to prosecute. So.
Yeah,
But I guess
let's assume that there was. I don't know.
You could stop dissemination of their books or whatever, any material that they recorded. Like that, you can't prosecute them because they're dead, but maybe there still is something you could do. Because if their material is incitement, then you could stop it.
Well, that's tough because I doubt all of the material is incitement. Incitement it's going to be really specific.
It's a hard case, but I'm just saying if there is a point, there's got to be a point to the case if you're gonna. Win
all right, fine. So make it 50
years.
years. So make it more
okay
realistic.
But what you're saying is retroactively, it's only if it causes damage, then we should do something about it. So if I'm just running around in the street waving knives around, no one gets hurt, it just happens to be because everyone's, being wary. Mm-hmm. But like I shouldn't be allowed to do that.
No.
Because something could happen, not just because something hasn't happened. Mean that.
Well, I guess it's a combination of those three things. There's no clear, you're right. There's no clear, like, it's not that, like, if you don't have all three of these, it's definitely not incitement to violence. But it's kind of a combination of all three. If you don't have the actual violence that occurred, you need rock solid on the other two. If you have that violence occurred soon after, with reason to think that it was caused by this, then maybe you don't need as rock solid on the other two. The other two being that somebody listening to these words has to interpret them as incitement to violence and not just something else. And a reasonable person in the speaker situation has to be aware that his words could lead to violence.
Okay, so when you said you disagree with where I was going or my stance on it, was it that because you thought there were another two things to add, or was it that you still don't think that this definition or approach is correct? I don't know. You said you wanted to push back on what I had said.
Well,
I guess we'll see.
It depends. We have to kind of I think flesh it out a a little more. Yeah. Okay. But I wanted to just summarize. So
just to be clear, you're not a free speech purist.
It depends really what we mean by free speech purist, because there is kind of a way I think of free speech.
Maybe like an idealist, free speech idealist, but not a...
What does that mean?
More that like you give it utmost gravity, it's essential, It's should be, it's one of the highest pillars of humanity and civilization. I don't know. You wax eloquent about it. You praise it. You love it. You're passionate for it. But you're not a purist that says you could say whatever you want.
I don't think you can say whatever you want, but that's
without like prosecution. We're talking about prosecution by the government, legal prosecution.
That's definitely what we're talking about right now.
Right.
I think later we could make a distinction about a distinction between illegal and cancelable, whether like society is warranted to cancel you even if it's not illegal. But maybe let's leave that for later.
Right.
But let's focus right now on the legality. So it depends on it depends what you mean by free speech purists, because as I kind of prepared before this episode, I do think I have a way of kind of defining what free speech is that actually does become like, once we limit it to this, like this is what is protected, it's always protected. There's no exception. The exceptions are when it's actually a bit different. And if you think of free speech as simply like utterances of your mouth, then you're right. I'm not a free speech purist. There are times when the things that come out of your mouth can be prosecuted and you can be liable for their consequences. But and I'll explain right now, because that's what we're doing. We're explaining our position. So what do I think is always protected? It's the exchange of ideas. It's the exchange of an opinion. It's the sharing of a perspective, of a worldview, of a conclusion. We can get even deeper. And I tried to get, I'll try to get deeper, but it's harder. It's of course becomes complex when you get deeper. But in brief, it's when you are using your rational faculties to make conclusions about the world, your conclusions about the world can never be prosecuted. It's always protected, no exceptions. The times when free speech is, quote, prosecutable is when it's not the content that's being prosecuted. It's not your opinion that's being prosecuted. It's not this idea that's being censored. Rather, it's that within this context, this particular material can't be displayed, or it's the method that you're using, which is unlawful, or it's the fact that you're not just stating your opinion, you're shouting your opinion in some old person's ear constantly. Like, there's other things going on that is not really just the sharing of the expressing of an idea. When you limit a situation to an expressing of an idea, that can never be prosecuted. It's when you add this other stuff. You're doing other things that you can then say, well, hey, I was just talking. Well, talking is not what's protected. It's the expression of an idea. And you weren't just expressing an idea, you were doing it in a harassing way, you were doing it in a intimidating, aggressive way, you were making too much noise late at night in a community, after midnight where children need to sleep or whatever. Like all these other things, that does mean that there are times when free speech in a sense is prosecutable, but it's because what actually occurred was not exactly what is protected by free speech.
Okay, so if I sort of understand, you're saying that it's rational opinions, rational ideas that are protected.
Well, you can't say that rational opinions are protected, because we're not going to judge that some opinions are rational and some opinions are not rational. But the point is that opinions, and it's an order that human beings are always free to use their rational faculty, to use that spirit of curiosity, to see the world and observe and make conclusions. That must always be free, must always be protected. So anything that one says that can reasonably be construed as doing that is protected at all. I don't just think I'm going in, I'm taking a bold risk here, with the risk that you're going to catch me on some exception, but I'm going to say there are zero exceptions to that being protected.
Okay, so so I understand like the case where if you're just shouting at night in a neighborhood, you're just screaming. Mm-hmm. Just nonsense.
Yeah, nonverbal.
Verbal.
Without words. That's what I'm going for. No words, just sounds.
Okay, but even if it is words,
okay,
you're just saying, you're just shouting random words, I don't know, it could even be a song or something, and kids need to sleep. Mm-hmm. So there, it would be an easy case of you can't do that. We have noise laws. Now, if all of a sudden he was expressing his opinion about something, just shouting, abortion should be illegal, Jesus is coming, then it's still prosecutable because you can't make noise after a certain time.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a less, I don't know. Then it's just has to do with the noise laws. It has nothing. It's not as
correct.
easy to prosecute or something.
You can't prosecute him for what he said. You can't prosecute him for saying that abortion should be legal or illegal. I forget which one you said, or that Jesus is coming. You can't prosecute him for that. You can prosecute him for the noise he made in a neighborhood late at night after hours where it's unlawful to make such noise.
Okay, so it's kind of a fringe case where I'm not exactly sure what it shows, except that maybe a free speech purist would say no, he's even allowed to shout at night because it's just utterances. But I think even a free speech purist is not talking about that, about noise laws.
Well, you never know. I think there are some people who claim to be free speech purists that haven't thought it through sufficiently. That say, yeah, I'm totally a free speech purist, and then when you offer that case, they might, in order to not back down from their original position, they might say, yeah, he should be allowed to do that too, and then you might give a more extreme case of you literally screamed in someone's ear
right.
for hours until their eardrums broke. And it's like, yeah, he should be able to do that too. Like at some point, you're going to catch him, and he's going to be like, wait, something's not making sense here, because he hasn't broken it down and thought it through sufficiently.
Right, but I would say then that it's easily amenable. You just say anything that causes damage from the sound waves themselves is not allowed, because obviously that's you're creating destruction through sound waves. But if the utterances you're making are not causing damage from the sound waves, which is something measurable, observable, then in that case it's all allowed, because it's just how you make the utterances of your sound to form different words that then all of a sudden you start getting into trouble, because it affects not your eardrums but your emotions, the other person's interpretation of what you're saying out loud.
So wait, you're saying that when it affects the emotions, it's different or it's the same as when...
That it's a different case. Like,
it's a different case.
You can, a free speech purist would be able to come up with a definition without much harm. He could just say, if it's recorded, if what he's saying could be recorded and also at a lower volume that's still audible, but then in that case he should be able to do whatever he wants, as long as it's not causing damage with the sound waves.
Okay.
But let's go to the more...
Wait, I thought you were in the middle of a sentence there. Did you finish your thought?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so...
That wasn't clear?
Maybe not entirely.
I was just talking about... Well, I wasn't finishing my critique on what you had said. I was just finishing up the purist
okay, fine.
position.
But I think there's more to discuss there about what the purist would say. And also I wanted to add that it's important to distinguish that it's not just about speech, as in like the utterances of your mouth. It's the written word. It's even hand motions. It's even artistic material, paintings. The issue of obscene material, pornography, that comes up in free speech debates.
Right, but even the free speech purists wouldn't let you write on someone else and just say, oh, you're allowed to write whatever you want. What's the problem? No, but you're writing on someone else's property. You're
correct. I hope the free speech purists wouldn't say that. So that's what it means. Like, what does it really mean to be a free speech purist? Like, nobody would accept that, right? Well, maybe there is somebody who would, and because he's so adamant on claiming that he's a free speech purist.
I guess so. I just think that it's not as much of an issue. I think it's pretty simple to get around it. You just say, if the device which you're implementing with the free speech with doesn't cause direct harm, then it's not a problem. Like,
okay.
If through the same mechanism you can make unintelligible noises and yet it still causes harm, then it's a problem.
Yeah. The way I would say it is the content of your speech, the content of your expression, the ideas that you are getting across, that is always protected. No exception. The method with which you use, not always protected. There are definitely exceptions. The context in which you express them, also not always protected. There are definitely exceptions.
So you said like opinions should be protected.
Yeah.
And what if my opinion is libel? What if it's,
Wow, I didn't write about libel in my notes. Man,
whoops, gotcha.
libel, good one. What if your opinion is libel?
What if I'm the Tiger King and my opinion is that Carol Baskin killed her husband? And I think I'm going to go on Netflix and say she is
Who?
yeah, Carol Baskin. Did you watch Tiger King?
No,
Basically, do you know what it's about?
no,
What were you doing all of COVID? Basically,
not watching Tiger
Not
King, I
watching.
guess.
this guy owned a bunch of tigers in Florida or something. There were all these different competing zoos, and he would bring people. He'd exploit the tigers, and Carol Baskin claimed to not exploit the tigers and give them more freedom. And then there's a whole drama. And then he did some digging into her, and her ex-husband had disappeared, and he thought that she fed him to the tigers. Spoiler alert.
Okay.
And then he actually hired a hitman, but ignoring that case. But he'd go and say, hey, I think she's a murderer. Wouldn't go through the proper channels, through the police, through the investigators. And there's libel like that, and then there's, I don't know, just gossip. It's still an opinion. He thinks she killed him. Or there's this person, did such and such. Even though it wasn't illegal, he did this, and I'm going to ruin his reputation. Or even if what you're saying, even if your opinion is that that the other guy did something illegal, you can't just start saying that stuff out loud. You're damaging him,
Yeah.
and then he could sue you.
Yeah, it's good points. I should have thought about that, honestly. It's a good challenge. I mean, as it is, I would point out that there is a lot of it's not as if libel is just, especially in the United States, it's not as if you can just cite libel and you've immediately taken away somebody's freedom of speech. It's an immediate exception to free speech. Far from it. There's a lot of things that get said that are false about people, and they're not so easily prosecutable. Sometimes the person who is damaged by it sues and wins. Sometimes they sue and they don't win. There's a lot
They
of
always have to sue, because if they don't sue, then it makes them sound like they're admitting guilt, and so
Maybe.
that they've actually done that thing.
yeah. It depends on the situation.
So even if they have done it, they'll still sue because they want people to not think that they actually did it.
Maybe. Again, I think it depends on the situation. Like, I know that when it comes to libel laws, celebrities have a different status than regular people. One of the few places in law where that actually makes sense.
Really, I didn't know that.
When
I know that there was the whole trial with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp,
yeah,
where it was this big fought out thing where he sued her for libel because she made claims about sexual assault or harassment.
yeah.
Not through legal channels, but through a magazine, through media.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. I don't think that just because you're a celebrity, immediately anybody can say anything about you. That's not true. So yes, you can still be a victim of libel even if you're a celebrity. But there's definitely some distinctions when it comes to celebrities versus like people who are very well known.
Oh, you're saying that the laws are less strict
Yeah.
for celebrities.
Yeah, meaning there's more you can say about celebrities than a regular person. If you spread a rumor about just some random person who no one ever heard of, and now the only way that anybody associates that name is with this is very dark, absurd rumor that they have child slaves in their basement or something, and that's no one has ever heard of them other than that rumor. It's easier, I think, to pin you for libel than if they're like Donald Trump, and then you start spreading a rumor that Donald Trump keeps like child slaves in the White House or something.
Or that he went to Epstein Island.
Yeah, sure, that he went to Epstein Island. Well, certainly, if you start claiming that he went to Epstein Island, you're definitely not going to get pinned for libel ever, because you can always say yeah, his name is you've seen the pictures, you can always say yeah, there's sufficient evidence to claim that.
So you're saying it's evidence based?
Well, certainly, yeah. No, there's a lot. What I'm trying to say is not any one thing. It's a lot of things. There's a lot of specifics that go into libel. There's a lot of fine print about it.
So you're not necessarily safe, but you're just saying, oh, it's known. that he's on that list or something, but it's not as if that list went through a court of law, through due process, and like have this stamp of approval. This is
Absolutely,
evidence.
absolutely not. That's not the standard for libel, though. Generally, certainly for celebrities, especially when it comes. I think, I just, without knowing why this is the case legally, but people do spread online that Donald Trump. People say online that Donald Trump went to Epstein Island, or that Donald Trump was one of Epstein's clients, and
So
they're
you're
not going to be
saying-
able to get charged for libel for that.
You're saying there are actual laws protecting people against being sued for libel by celebrities. I didn't know this. I thought it was just, celebrities don't go, they just can't go after everyone that says something about them. So A, it's unrealistic, and B, libel court cases are hard to win because, like you said, there's so many aspects of it that you really have to win over a jury very subjectively, provide a lot of evidence that it actually caused harm, it actually did affect their livelihood,
And also that it wasn't true.
and it wasn't true. But also, what if something is true?
If something is true, I'm pretty sure you can say it. I'm pretty sure you can't get hit for libel if it's true. Pretty
So
sure.
if I do something
Try to look that up.
that's not illegal, if I don't know,
Cheat. Well,
Cheat.
that's not a good example. Sorry.
it's probably the classic example. Why is it not a good example?
Oh well, because
Oh, you're just saying
because
it-
I know you and
we're
we're friends.
talking theoretically.
Yeah, of course, we're talking theoretically. I just didn't want to give an example that you might
Okay,
get comfortable
but it
with.
is the classic example where it's something that's like taboo in society, but not technically illegal. There are very few
Yeah.
cases of taboo but not illegal.
Or you went to a prostitution house.
Okay, but that's same line of like similar field. Like I'm looking for something.
Okay.
Is there anything that's taboo that's actually that's not illegal? That's separate from that.
There are things. I'm sure there are things.
Okay. Maybe like doing drugs, I don't know, still it's not as taboo even, and it's illegal.
You
if
can
it's
come up.
hard
You can
enough.
come up with something that's just so socially off. You can come up with something like every night this person goes out to the forest away from everybody else, and he
Screams at a
he strips naked and starts acting like a horse and I don't know, masturbates until morning. like things that are like not
so
illegal.
you're saying
but
if this is true, then it's your right as a complete stranger to just tell the whole world
yes,
to expose this.
yes.
That doesn't sound right to me. Maybe
that doesn't
like
sound right to you?
meaning maybe you're right, but it doesn't sound morally right. Like I should be able to, within the privacy of my own domicile, to do whatever I want if I'm not hurting anyone. And
And you're just not free from somebody spreading this information.
but if they, if the only way they know about it is by stalking me,
Oh, that they did something illegal to know the information?
no, I don't. Well, I mean, I understand if I did this in public, like if I started behaving like a naked if I was a naked horse in public, then it's not my right to just like demand that everyone forget this ever happened.
Yeah.
But if I did this, which is usually the case with adultery, you don't do it in public. Then if someone sees you, it's because they're kind of going after you. They're
There are plenty of ways for somebody to know the information without even wanting to have. They might not have intended to harm you. They just happen to know the information, and maybe they did intend to harm you, but they didn't do anything illegal. They just followed you, only in public areas.
right. So I'm saying they went out of their way. So it's legal, but you're obviously not. You're not trying to. You were trying to hide it, but they exposed it anyways. So
Yeah.
why is it their right to expose information about you that could harm you financially or whatever, reputably, I don't know.
I guess that's a good example of a situation where speech is clearly harmful, but it's actually also protected because it's true.
So I personally not that it's, happened to me. I'm not a celebrity.
By the way, Google does say that if it's true, you can't be charged with libel. At least that the AI overview says no. It says generally here, but then it goes on. It sounds more emphatic. You generally cannot be charged with or successfully sued for libel if the statement you published is true, as truth is considered an absolute defense to a defamation claim. There's actually a link here to the words absolute defense. Absolute defenses in libel are truth and absolute privilege. Ooh. Truth is a defense if the statement is substantially true, even if it is false. Well, that's interesting as well. It doesn't even have to be fully true. Absolute privilege applies to certain contexts, like statements made by witnesses during judicial proceedings, makes sense, and provides a complete defense regardless of the statement's falsity or malicious intent.
Mm-hmm. So it might be true. I just don't like it. I disagree with it.
No,
I think it's protecting the wrong type of people. I think that's protecting the paparazzi, the media, the moral purists who wish to enforce morality on everyone, and if the gossip mongers that if you step out of line, then they're gonna expose you. I don't like that. I think that if you're not harming anyone and you don't intend that anyone should find out, and someone does and exposes you, I don't think they should be protected, even if what you did is true or not. I just don't see why truth should have a bearing, because, and this is going on like the ethical principle of like, you should be able to do whatever you want as long as you don't harm others. Don't do unto others as you wouldn't want done to yourself. Like, I don't understand why the paparazzi is able to make people's lives hell, and they're protected by it, when they themselves wouldn't want that to happen to them. They wouldn't want someone investigating them and spilling all their secrets, even if like we're talking only legal things. We don't like parading someone's private life online. I don't think that should be protected. I think it should actually, I think the person should be protected against being exposed, and I think the people exposing should not be protected. When it seems like the law is at least we're talking about in America, it's probably different in many other countries. Mm-hmm. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm not trying to. The point of this conversation is not to like say, oh well, this is what the law says, so that's what it is. No, the point is we don't really care what the law says. We're arguing on whether we agree with the law, what we think the moral intuition is, and how things should work regarding free speech.
Right, because it is important. A lot of the time, people say, oh, well, if the law says this, then it's illegal, so you shouldn't be allowed to do that. No, the law is the law because we as humanity have made it such. Mm-hmm. It is always up for debate, at least, and it should be. And the reason things are illegal is because they're bad, not the other way around. They're not bad because they are illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But I know people that don't necessarily always see that difference. They'll jump to, oh, that's not allowed.
On the Benji and Cal podcast, we see that difference.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
Yeah.
And I would like to add, I think that if the paparazzi is giving Elon Musk a hard time about, I don't know, exposing all of his illegitimate children or something, not illegal, but just like him having illegitimate children. I think he pays child support. I don't think he is trying to con anyone. But they make him out to be some terrible person or something or other, or just invading his private life. If I were him in that situation, I would spend a lot of money counter-investigating all the journalists and making their life hell just so that they get a taste of it. And I don't know why I don't hear about that happening more often, where journalists, like journalism revenge or whatever by rich celebrities who just hire private investigators to follow the journalists who are making their life hell.
Well, we never know how many backdoor deals occur among these powerful people. Maybe Elon Musk finds something on some journalist, but then he goes to them and says, well, call off your investigation, I'll call off mine, something like that, and then we never hear about it. Who knows how often that happens?
Right. I guess there also still is a thing about it's a losing battle. There's always going to be another journalist. You're not always going to be even if you take out this one.
Yeah.
Someone else will come along and say, oh, well, doing an investigation about how you investigated this person and you
Yeah.
know, tried to take
You're
away
just-
our free speech. Or
Yeah,
something.
you're just adding something.
Yeah,
that
so
other people can
maybe
use.
at some point as a celebrity, you're probably like, I don't care what the National Enquirer says, you know, even if they claim that I'm an alien having relations with a horse. I'm just going to leave it. I can't countersue everyone. If I countersue it, maybe they'll think that I'm actually offended and then they'll double down. It'll attract more people. So at some point, I don't know, would you like to be a celebrity? Or you
No.
would, even if it comes with wealth and
There's
eternal
nothing-
fame?
No. There's nothing about being a celebrity that attracts me. There are some professions that generally people who are celebrities do that do attract me. Like, I do think it'd be cool to be an actor, maybe, or to be a songwriter, or a singer, or even
Football
a
star.
director, or screenwriter, something like that.
Athlete?
Or an athlete, a good example as well. Yeah, there are some professions that often make people famous. That those professions, I think, there's something. Maybe I would have fun doing those professions. The fact that they often come with fame generally are not part of the attraction. Like just being famous, I don't want that.
So what about being like a G-list? I don't know, I'm making this up, but I'm assuming there's A-list celebrities, D-list.
Okay.
Somewhere along the lines, you know, at what point would you say, no, I don't want to be a celebrity past this many people knowing who I am?
I don't have a line.
You don't have a line, but you must, because you just said you did.
No, I don't think I said I had
You
a
said
line.
you don't want to be a celebrity, but you are already known by people. So somewhere there's got to be a threshold, a vague threshold even.
Well, no, there's a difference between that the only people who know of you are people who know you personally, and then there are people who know of you that only know you in your professional persona, who only know you in your whatever you do that makes you famous. That's the start of, that's a switch. That's not just a difference in quantity. That's some sort of switch.
But if you comment online right now,
Man.
you're a celebrity from being on this podcast from people who have never met you personally. It's only like a few hundred, but it's something.
I was thinking about that as well, but well, let's go to commenting online, because in theory, if the Cal and Benji podcast becomes the biggest thing on YouTube, in theory, that does make us famous, and that is just a difference in quantity, pretty much, from where things are right now and where things would be in that hypothetical. But commenting on social media is definitely different, because you're right, people don't know you personally, but they know your name, I suppose, and they know the things you have said on social media. So in a sense, they know a version of you. And
I've had people actually, you know, if I was posting on an alt-right group or something about how I think that they're racists or something, then I've had them, you know, look through my pictures and make a meme out of me or something.
Really?
Yeah, it's happened. So, you know, it only got like, I don't know, maybe 60 likes or something. So before, I didn't go viral, thank God.
The meme of you.
The meme, yeah.
That's a decent number. That's a decent number.
It is a decent number, but they've already forgotten who I am. And, you know, I
well,
don't want to be one of those memes that actually goes across the internet, you know, the drunken guy meme or the crazy girl meme or something.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I don't think I would want that either. There is an expression, right? The 15 minutes of fame, that where some people do kind of go viral for a bit there, you know, hawk to a girl.
But that's forever. That's not like she is forever. I don't know. Maybe in 40 years she'll be unrecognizable. But
I don't know. I would think I would call that 15 minutes of fame. I would call that
wherever she goes now, she knows because of the nature of the world.
I don't think so.
Chocolate Rain guy, he's Chocolate Rain forever.
I don't even know who that is.
You don't know.
And I think that helps my point.
Rain.
Okay, I've heard of that.
One falls down, the other do the same.
I've heard that.
Chocolate Rain.
But I don't know who the person is.
You wouldn't recognize him?
I wouldn't recognize him, for sure not. And with Hawk to a Girl, it's only because we're now talking about Hawk to a Girl that I can picture her in my head. And now if I saw her on the street, I'd probably be like, wait, that's Hawk to a Girl, because I was just thinking about her. But before this conversation, if I randomly saw Hawk to a Girl on the street, I would not recognize her. I wouldn't think that's Hawk to a Girl. Not a chance.
I think that more reflects you than the world in general.
Well, I am using myself as kind of a representative of certainly many people in the world. I agree that there are some people who really follow this stuff closely and like, you know, and they really know who Hawk to a Girl is. And to them, it's like, it's forever now. It's ingrained in their heads. But I think the average person who's just getting on with their life, first of all, the internet, the Gen Z culture on the internet tends to exaggerate how well known they are. I think there are a lot of people who don't even know the 3 words Hawk to a Girl. They're like, what does that even mean? They don't even know what you're talking about. There's plenty of people like that. Then there's a lot of other people. I'm telling you, there are plenty of people.
I mean, there are plenty
who don't
of
know
people,
who this person
but
is.
what percentage of the world population? I think
Percentage of the world population who don't even know who October Girl is? I would give me a number. Give me a number. Let's go.
I would venture to guess that, you know, a lot of people who go viral in America, it's just viral in the West or something.
Mm-hmm.
I would venture to guess that Haktua was popular even in non-English speaking countries.
Give me the number of the percentage of people in the world who have never heard of Hawk to a Girl.
So these are Amish people, very old people that don't know how to use technology.
Okay.
Very young people that don't know how to use technology.
Okay.
People that have better things to do with their time than be on their phones. These are people that live in, you know, remote, that don't have this technology at all. Of the world, I'd say 50% know of her.
Okay, that was more.
Maybe even more, 60%.
That was less than I was expecting.
You were
from
expecting like 90 or something.
Based on the way that conversation had just gone, I thought you were going to go to at least 2/3. I don't know, maybe 70.
I'm thinking 60.
60% have heard of Hawk to a Girl.
Yeah.
I was definitely thinking more than 50% have not, and I thought you were going to push back on that. But yeah, if you're going to go for 60% have heard of her.
There's a lot of people out there that don't speak English.
Yes.
And so
absolutely.
they have their own meme viral thing that's like, whenever I see anything from that world on the internet, I'm like, what is this nonsense? I don't understand what's going on.
You know
but billions of people do. So.
Right. You know what? I'll make it easier for you. The percentage of the English-speaking world, and that is the United States, Canada, Australia, South Africa, England.
85%.
85% have heard of her. No, I would still say less than
I'm
half.
just excluding less than half.
Less than 50%.
80%. Because I don't know how many like children that don't. These are people that have the faculties. We're talking people that have the faculties to.
Yeah. Above the age of 5. Is that fair?
Nah, I'd say 10.
Fine. Above the age of 10.
And below the age of 80.
Above the age of 10, below the age of 80. All right, you're making it a little harder for me. I'm still going to go with more than 50% have never heard of her.
All right. Well, I'm glad we settled on a number because we will never know.
That was the scientific.
We don't have real numbers to ask Google. Can you ask Google? How would it know?
It wouldn't. Yeah, it has no way of knowing.
You could do a Monte Carlo sampling, but it'd be very difficult. You'd have to really randomize. You'd take a sample of 10,000 people, send them a form, ask like some anonymous survey online, IP addresses at random, and ask if they've heard of the Haktua.
Yeah, maybe. By the way, part of the reason why I'm convinced that more than half of people have never heard of her is because I had not heard of her when her little brief video went viral. I was watching this YouTube video. I think it was from Prager University. It was from one of these conservative YouTube channels, and they were showing like 6 different pictures to random college students, and they were asking them which ones they know. Who are these people? And so 3 of them would be well-known people to anyone who knows history and knows politics, or like generally, I don't know, like it would be Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., maybe Winston Churchill, like people like that. People who like, they're not necessarily alive today, but anyone who like decently knows history knows who these people are. And the other 3 would be like people from the internet of like the last week. And so one of the people was Hawk to a Girl. I remember watching the video and thinking like, oh yeah, I know
her. I don't know any of these important historical figures.
That's what the college students would often say. That's not what I would say.
But you also knew the historical figures. Oh, you were the opposite.
I was the opposite. I would definitely know the historical figures because they would be quite easy historical figures, and I would generally also know the like contemporary internet people. But then this one girl, I looked at her, I was like, I have no idea who that is. But then the college students started saying, oh yeah, that's Hawk to a Girl. And only then did I learn who this person was.
Do you know the most viral YouTube video?
The most viral YouTube video, it's not Charlie Bit My Finger.
That was like 10 years ago. Was
Okay,
the most viral.
that was 10 years ago.
Slash, even then, it was probably
The most viral YouTube
second
video.
to "Baby" by Justin Bieber.
Okay. Oh, it's songs. Right. If you
It
include
includes
songs.
songs, yes.
Oh, it's Gangnam Style.
So Gangnam Style was the big one,
Okay.
and it's still high up. I would say, as he probably is the most viral one I could think of. There is the Baby Shark song,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that really counts because that's just kids watching it on replay. But we'll look at it right now.
So before I even show the result, every time I've looked this up before, and every time there's always some video that's like just some random kids video, usually not in English. I think I saw it in Russian. Maybe the one I'm thinking of is exclusively Russian. It's like a Russian kids video, animated like some cartoon, and
Or
that
a Hindi song.
yeah, no, not a song. I'm talking very
alright.
specifically a kids cartoon
Oh, kids, go, sorry.
has some obscene number of YouTube
So
views.
Wheels on the Bus is number 3. Despacito is number 2, right? I remember Despacito took over Gangnam Style. Yeah, there's phonics songs with 2 words. Shape of You with Ed Sheeran, but I think YouTube specifically promoted that.
Wait, what did you say was number 1? Wheels on the Bus.
Baby Shark Dance, but
Okay.
Despacito's 2, Wheels on the Bus 3, Bath Song by Coco Melon, Johnny Yes Papa by Lulu Kids. They're all and See You Again. I was gonna say, yeah, that's
Yeah, but there's
that I remember is billions. Baby Shark has 15 billion views. Despacito is 8.7, which is interesting because that means it's following a Zipf's law distribution. The Baby Shark having twice as many as Despacito,
interesting.
and then it.
But doesn't that mean that the third place should have half of the second place?
Yeah, it's not a
not-
strict law, but
not perfect.
there's not so many with 7 billion. There's only 3 with 7 billion. Then it jumps down to 6 billion. Another 3 only have 6 billion, then 5 billion. If it didn't follow that, we'd expect it to be more uniform and a lot more to be at the same magnitude.
But yeah, there's always these children's videos that are up there in the top 5 because I guess
You just replay it
you-
because kids love to hear the same thing over and over. They're like, I want to hear Baby Shark Dance. And you're like, not Baby Shark Dance. I want to hear Baby Shark Dance.
or Wheels on the Bus.
Wheels on the Bus. I'm not going to sleep until we do Wheels on the Bus. And then they also have control over, YouTube Kids or something over their iPad. And that's the only thing that they know to press, so they just press it every day. Kids don't.
And kids are a constant market. Throughout history, there are always kids. It's great. There's if there's some markets that maybe will go away. They're fads, but there's always kids.
I mean, they could go away. It's just we'll be in trouble as a species.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
there are definitely aging nations like Japan,
Yeah.
Korea, I think, where the birth rate is so low that they're not replacing humans with new humans. That's how I say it. The death rate is higher than the birth rate. So eventually they'll go extinct unless they, it's a very slow process, but, they could fix it with immigration or different ways to incentivize having children. But
and of course, it's not just going extinct that's your danger. It's the society starts suffering tremendously when the number of young people doesn't outnumber the number of old people. The number of old people can't be supported by the younger generation. People who retire can't be supported by the working class.
Right, because it's all a pyramid scheme, and the idea is eventually when the older generation retires, they're going to use the money that the younger generation is putting away for retirement and then push it down the line.
Yeah, when really it should be that the money you put away throughout your life is the money you use after retirement. That would be a little safer, more secure. But yeah, I don't think it's only that though. It's I don't know. I'd have to have more knowledge of societies and cultures. But I feel like there's other just like unhealthy things that start happening when the birth rate is too low in a society.
So maybe we should get back to free speech, though.
Yeah.
because that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
But we're allowed to talk about whatever we want, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
It's important not to be too restricted.
Right,
You know,
but we have free speech.
we have exactly. Oh, that's what you were going for.
Yeah.
Okay. I was playing off of you, but I wasn't sure
I see.
at what point. At what point we were there. Cool.
Okay, so I want to get back to incitement to violence, calling for violence, platforming people that might say harmful things.
Okay.
So, okay, let me
Oh yeah. Okay.
let me give you two different cases. Okay,
Cool.
one case is debating trans rights. Okay,
Oh wow. Okay.
what that usually is should people who identify as women, should we acknowledge that, respect that, not just
Unless they're women.
right, but there are more practical implications like participating in men's sports, using men's bathrooms, and vice versa.
Okay, but let's say it's not a trans issue we're talking about, it's a free speech issue. So free speech about the trans issue, the trans debate.
Right.
Meaning trans men, trans women in women's sports, or trans women using women's bathrooms. Of course there's what to talk about there. And both of them I'm not really in favor of.
Or gender-affirming surgery for someone
Yeah.
above 18.
All that stuff. Plenty of
But-
stuff to talk about, but we should talk about specifically
But I'm bringing this as an example because
Okay.
one person on the right would say, well, free speech, it's important, we should talk about this.
what's
This is
the free we should talk about
we should
the
about recognizing trans women as women or something.
okay.
Maybe it's a bit too, I don't know. My point is just on the other side, they would say there are, this community of trans women, they're at risk. Suicide rates are higher. Homicide rates are higher. I don't know. I've heard people say you're genociding an entire community by not respecting, by saying we shouldn't let them exist or something, or just denying their. Maybe you don't agree with it, but saying something like, "No, they're not women. You're denying their existence, and you're causing harm to them." So, a person on the right might not see it as causing harm. They just say, "Oh, I just don't. I don't wish harm upon you. I don't think that there's going to be harm caused to you." People on the left would say, or extreme left, right, extreme right, whatever, would say, no, you are causing harm. And maybe they try to build a case, or maybe not. That's a case that where the left would oppose it, the right would claim free speech. On the other hand, maybe if you talk about platforming someone who is talking about Islam spreading Islam, or too many immigrants or something, and you want to say, oh, there's immigration is, or okay. Here's the thing. The thing is, usually now a lot of issues on the right, people will say it's free speech, and on the left they'll say, no, you're causing harm. Usually it's the people on the left who would censor it. But there are things I could think of where the right would say, no, we shouldn't let that.
More people on the right are not in favor of what Edward Snowden did than the left. I think.
Okay, so that's a good example, I guess. And then there's also, riots. Not the riots, the protests. The pro-Palestine protests on campus, taking over universities, where the right would say, no, you're supporting terrorists. This is harmful. The left would say, no, we're supporting our, whatever, people in Gaza or something.
Okay.
And, there are certain policies by Trump that he's enacted. I don't know if you would agree with them, but to prosecute some of these, maybe they're even paid protesters. A lot of them have been exposed as paid protesters, but maybe it's their right to be paid to go on these marches.
Prosecuting or withdrawing public funding?
I think they've been prosecuting. Yeah, prosecuting, not just withdrawing public funding.
Prosecuting people who are like on a pro-Hamas march or something like that?
Organizing them. That he tried to deport or sue one of these guys at the universities who was just organizing all of these things. And then, the right would say, oh, you're harming Jews on campus. They don't feel safe. You're harming the state, the United States of America. These are anti-American things that you're calling for. You're calling for maybe even death to America. You're supporting people who call for death to America. They don't have a right to chant these things. We should stop them.
No. Let's go.
Like
I disagree.
They should be allowed to go on their rallies, support, wave their Hezbollah flags, wave Iran flags, wave Hamas flags.
Now, it depends, like, if the university has a right to not allow it, the U.S. government might have the right to withdraw public funding for a university that they no longer want to give public funding to. There's a lot of other things going on here that people can make their own decisions, but the idea that it's illegal to support Hamas, no, that's ridiculous.
Is it? First of all, I'm going to push back. It's not ridiculous. I think a lot of people on the right would say, no, that's completely reasonable.
Well, I'm often comfortable saying things that even loads of people would believe is ridiculous. So I'm giving my own opinion there. I don't care how many people believe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree that you don't care and that maybe you're going against, you traditionally identify as right-wing, conservative, and align with a lot of conservative pundits. But I guess in this instance, I guess it's more important for you to be consistent with free speech.
It's not just more important for me to be consistent with free speech. It's that free speech doesn't mean anything if it just means what I want to be said. It doesn't mean anything if it only applies to the things that I agree with. I
agree, but that's why I think that it's more a matter of, does this thing actually cause harm or not? And if you're waving Hamas flags, that I think has a stronger case for it, that you're going to wind up supporting, promoting terrorism and ultimately doing damage, and that it's a very dangerous thing to do. Whereas I don't think that the people who debate trans rights actually wish harm to trans people. That's not in the conservative, mission statement. I think in Hamas's mission statement, I know that they explicitly call for the destruction of the Jews, or the Houthi flag is death to America, death to the Jew, curse be upon the Jews, death to Israel. If you're waving one of those, it's very clear, as opposed to saying, no, I disagree that if you identify as a woman, that doesn't just necessarily make you a woman. I don't want anything to happen to you, of course, but I just disagree with that.
None of this is within the parameters of what warrants a restriction on free speech, though. Hamas has it in their charter that they want to destroy the state of Israel, possibly also kill all the Jews. I don't know for sure. I haven't read the charter. Destroying the state of Israel basically amounts to killing certainly a large portion of the Jewish people. So, but that doesn't mean that if I say, I support Hamas, or I support Hamas's fight against Israel, or I just wave a Hamas flag around in some public space, that doesn't mean that I'm inciting violence against Jews.
What about a Houthi flag? That's even more explicit. It says on the flag itself, death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews.
So there too, I would say that probably should still be protected, because when it's on a flag, it's less clear that you're inciting violence. It's not the same thing as saying, because also the incitement has to be directed, right? I have a very strict standard, and this is basically the standard that I think is in U.S. law, and this follows my intuitions, and this has basically been what's been in my head and heart for most of my life. It has to be very specific. It has to be directed. It's something you just say to the general, just throwing out there that Jews suck, death to Jews. That's not really a sufficient incitement to violence to warrant not being protected by free speech. It has to be kind of like you're directing it at somebody specific. You're saying like, you guys, you go and then do something specific. Go and take those baseball bats, take those pistols, whatever, and just go kill some Jews on the NYU campus or something like that.
What do you mean
that's
telling them?
That's
like
specific.
commanding them? Are you in a position of authority and they must listen to you or face?
No, you being in a position of authority, I think, is less important. There has to be some, I think,
You're
possible.
just some guy, and these people decided to listen to you.
Yeah, but it has to be like,
Why, they have to listen to you, though.
Well, no, but at some point you have to draw the line. I'm saying I'm not a free speech purist.
I mean, it sounds more like you are now.
Why? Because I'm okay with some. I'm not okay with. I should be
You're not
specific here.
okay, but you
I
don't
think-
think it should be
I think
criminalized
that somebody waving a Houthi flag
in America.
in America is fine, is protected.
In public.
There's actually more, at least from a legal precedent. There's more of a legal precedent against it if America was at war with the Houthis at the time. That's potentially treasonous.
It
But
says "Death to America" on the flag. How can you? You don't have to be at war with them, which they are in a way. But
Well,
I mean, they were. But
that is interesting because
mean, they definitely were.
there are treason laws. But of course, we're not talking about U.S. law. We're talking about our intuitions. But
Western law, yeah.
But it does help, or Western law. But I think it does help to use established law because people have thought this through very carefully, and there's a lot of cases that have come up, and there's a lot of precedent. So it's I think it's good. I'm certainly willing, and I want to draw inspiration from U.S. law regarding free speech. So
I mean, where I stand on it is, if someone waves a flag, a Houthi flag, and they don't know what they're waving, then obviously they shouldn't be criminalized. So it's not just the objective thing. They have to have intent. And then it becomes harder to actually prosecute. But I still think that if you could build a case, show that, this guy has links of, he's posted stuff about how he thinks that America has to end, that he thinks that violence is the only way to achieve the ends. Mm-hmm. This is a dangerous guy.
Yeah.
We have to stop them. I'm against, overly draconian laws that prohibit, like if you have a separatist movement in a country that's calling for peaceful resistance, then fine. That shouldn't be prosecuted. There are plenty of countries where the Catalans in Spain, the French Canadians in Canada, in America, they're always trying to secede from each other or something. I don't know. But I guess there's a Confederacy flag. I don't know. I don't know if you're allowed to fly.
You are.
You are?
I mean, I know that it happens.
I mean, if you're allowed to fly a Hezbollah flag.
I think you're allowed to fly.
I know that it happens too. That you're allowed to.
A Hezbollah flag.
First of all, I think that America is at war with Hezbollah.
Really?
They list them as a terrorist organization.
I don't know if that means they're at war with them.
Hezbollah has killed many Americans in the past.
Well, okay, none of this. Being at war with Hezbollah is something specific.
Right. They didn't declare openly war, I suppose, in the traditional sense. They're definitely considered an enemy. What's it called? An enemy.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
They're on the list of declared enemies.
Yeah. I think there needs to be that distinction is important. I think, like, if America is in an active war against another nation, waving the flag of that nation might be more of an issue. Just drawing on my general sense of U.S. law.
I think that it should be extended to designated terrorist groups and designated enemy states. I mean, I don't know. If China's, I don't think technically a declared enemy. It's more of an understood enemy. Russia's more of an understood. It's not listed as a terror group, although I think there are Russian groups that are.
Okay.
But certainly, you don't have to be at war with one of these countries to know that they're at war with you secretly. What defines at war means that you've made a declaration of war in your government.
Okay.
And that requires, there's precedent to that legally, I guess. there are implications of declaring war versus a special operation. I don't even know if Russia never declared war on Ukraine. It's all been a big special operation.
Okay.
Israel did declare war after October 7th. They came together, the government, they said we're at war. America with the Houthis, I don't think they declared war.
Okay.
I don't think there's a whole process in Congress that you need right. I'm not an American, but you need the consensus of the Senate to declare war. The
Yeah.
president can't just declare war,
That sounds right.
and so therefore he could just declare a special operation or whatever. But I disagree that you have to be at war formally. I think it's sufficient to be a non-allied state that wants to undermine your.
It probably depends how threatened the country feels, and I realize this isn't exactly a consistent logical standard here. But
So
like,
it's just up to the public.
yeah, it's kind of like exactly. It's kind of a public opinion thing. The U.S. doesn't currently feel threatened by the Houthis. So somebody waving a Houthi flag, no one really cares. Whatever, freedom of speech. We're not gonna.
Well, they did. Well, of course, they were attacking shipping lanes and causing billions of dollars in damage and attacking boats. And there was a whole operation against the Houthis.
Okay, I reiterate: the United States does not currently feel threatened by the Houthis in the sense of their existence. They don't feel that the Houthis are going to destroy them, are going to radically change them, are going in.
Well, they might.
The United
radically
States felt
change
threatened.
Interests.
The United States felt threatened by Imperial Japan and by Nazi Germany. The United States felt threatened by the Soviet Union, right?
They feel, I guess, nuclear.
There was a general,
annihilation.
yeah.
What about Iran?
Iran, okay, a little bit, certainly more than
More
the Houthis,
divisive.
but still not really. I don't think the United States feels threatened by Iran. I don't think they've felt threatened by Iran in the last, not anytime recently. So that might be. It's sort of like once you reach a threshold of like, okay, this is kind of serious. Like we're literally in World War II right now. If you're waving a Nazi flag, like, okay, put that person away. Like get that person out of my sight. Like we're at war here. This is serious. This is like I'm actually concerned about my life here because of my nation fighting this particular enemy. So then, yeah, maybe it's like when the public gets to a point where they can't tolerate it, then you can't do it. But
Speaking of like Nazi Germany, there was a lot of, at the beginning, harmful but just opinions about the Jews and rallies against the Jews, burning books by the Jews.
yeah,
But according to the guidelines that you gave,
yeah,
should be protected.
I know where this is going.
It is an extreme example, but I think it's important because at the time, it's like a lobster in a boiling pot. Yeah, it's like I don't think you should have to wait until X amount of people have been murdered. Even now, people have died as a result of these protests, and I don't think that you have to crack down on.
Wait,
everyone.
people have died as a result of which protests?
Let's say the Antifa. I don't know about Antifa. The Free Palestine protests.
Who has died?
There were people that there was a guy that was like attacked with signs and they killed him. He was an older guy. There were the two people shot in the back by a Marxist pro-Palestine guy yelling "Free Palestine." No, I don't think that means that everything, just because 3 people died, it means that everything should be, it should be cracked down on and they shouldn't be able to have these protests. But I think that means that there is a very real danger here and that at least some of these participants should be investigated as they're doing. If they really show signs of extremism, terrorism support.
Oh yeah, no, I'm okay with them being investigated. I think investigation is fine.
But
People who
if they build up a case that really shows that there's a high likelihood of them causing attacking or something, I think they should make their life difficult for them. I don't think maybe they should investigate, bring them in.
I don't think you can lock them up without I don't just think. You can't lock them up without trial and without cause.
Oh, right. No, of course. You have to have a trial and build up a case. I'm not saying just throw them in the dungeon. But there are cases where people, if I write, I'm going to shoot up a school tomorrow, what usually happens? I'm probably called in, investigated, my life is made hell, I'm exposed, blah, blah, blah. And then they probably don't lock me up because I haven't actually done anything.
Yeah.
But like that's a little crazy because if I actually pose a threat, then you can't just let me go free. Or you shouldn't.
Well, you can continue to
Monitor them very closely.
monitor that person.
No fly list, no weapons list.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Now we're on a little bit of the Second Amendment, but I'm okay with that. Somebody who has said things like this, said, I'm going to go shoot up a school or I'm, death to America or anything like that. Yeah, they shouldn't be able to buy a gun. I'm okay with that.
Okay, and let's say you did all that and that they still obtained a gun and killed 30 children. And now you, the police commissioner, I don't know, the DA, the attorney general, whatever, they come up to you and say, hey, we knew about this guy. He made all these threats.
Yeah.
You knew about it.
Who's you?
You, in this case, are the attorney general. I don't know.
Okay.
Someone with the power.
And who's talking? Who's saying this?
The public, the parents
Okay.
of the murdered children.
Yeah.
They say, why, all the signs were there. Why did you let him go back home and go free?
I will admit this is a tough question. And also this is a pretty recent, I would say a recent development where this is enough of a kind of pattern in the country where we can now kind of talk about this as like a thing that happens. And maybe it should inspire a new standard of something, a sort of a label, a legal label that somebody gets, a sort of like
A threat.
disgruntled.
Incel.
Okay.
No, it doesn't have to be an incel. It's not actually.
For lack of better wording, a disgruntled incel label.
I mean, you could be a very big threat and not be celibate.
Yeah, I don't really take the term incel so literally. I just
Right.
view it as kind of a word for men who are unhappy and bitter and at risk of.
But as we said last week, even if there were no men, well, as you said, women would be as violent.
Well, sure. As we said last week, if there were no men, yeah, I think women would.
Shoot up schools.
Would women shoot up schools? That's a tough one. But they would harm each other in different ways, perhaps.
Right.
And
Okay,
I
but-
think they would be violent.
Sorry, I keep getting you off track.
Yeah, thank you. What was I saying? Yes. So I think it's possible. Maybe it is possible that we're in the progress of developing kind of a separate standard when it comes to like somebody can be labeled as kind of like a disgruntled incel, and then there's a different set of rules for that person. And like, yeah, maybe I don't think you can't imprison somebody for showing signs of being a future school shooter, but
What about a psychiatric ward? Sectioning them, as they say in
like
England.
but they can't leave. You're keeping them there.
Until a doctor
that's also
says
tough.
that they're healthy and not a threat.
I don't know if I would trust that. Until a doctor says they're healthy and not a
I
threat.
don't know. Why we put people in infirmaries, not infirmaries.
Yeah, but
all the
I
time
don't know that
against their will.
a psychiatric disorder is what's at play here. I don't know that this is the same thing.
Shooting up a whole bunch of people. It's not a.
No, that's not.
Psych-
That's not at all necessarily a psychiatric disorder. It's a
It's not a genetic latent
it's a
thing
spiritual
that can't
problem.
be spiritual.
it's a moral problem.
It's definitely a moral problem. But yeah, I mean, I there could be a totally healthy person that becomes a terrorist mass shooter because they've been driven insane. So it's not comparable to someone that was born with a certain, psychological disorder. If they're bipolar or like, I don't think that all terrorists are people with latent disorders that just come out.
Okay, I'm glad. Yeah.
I think a lot of them are, but I think anyone could be driven to become a terrorist if they're like mentally tortured enough, sure.
All right, this is outside of the scope of
A little bit, I guess.
or at least I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure what to respond. Maybe.
Okay.
Who knows?
So let's continue talking about enemies of the state.
Okay, that's a good.
Platforming them.
To what
We
extent-
were talking about Edward Snowden. I want to also bring up Tucker Carlson platforming Putin, the Iranian president.
That was fine. I'm not a fan of it, but it was fine.
The Iranian president
Yeah,
who says death to America.
yeah.
And
Also, you can claim kind of journalistic protection, maybe. Yeah, I have no issue with that.
what if it was Hitler and platforming Hitler?
Yeah, no, I don't think you can prosecute Tucker Carlson
What if it's
for that.
a terrorist who just finished butchering random innocent children?
And
visit
they're
him
walking
in
around
jail?
free, and they're
No, you visit him in jail.
oh, sure, yeah. I think that's fine.
And he says, on your platform
Mm-hmm.
that you broadcast to millions of people,
Yeah,
he explains why they're all infidels,
yeah.
why he did what he did.
Uh-huh.
If he's the Unabomber, and you just, he has this whole manifesto about why, it's important to bomb random people. And let's say he's a very charismatic, clever
Yeah.
guy
Okay.
who's able to,
Yeah,
really sway people.
yeah,
You think it still should be allowed?
yeah. Absolutely. No,
So I
it's not.
disagree.
It's not even a question in my head, honestly. I don't even see the reason why we would think that should be prosecutable.
Because they're actively broadcasting their intent to destroy America, to destroy people, to destroy the country. I'm just using America as this case. It's because Tucker Carlson. He's the president of Iran chants death to America.
Yeah.
And Tucker asked him, what do you mean by that? And he's like, oh, I don't mean death to America.
Uh huh.
I mean death to killing, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I didn't know that was his defense.
It was crazy. I didn't watch all of
Oh,
it.
because
I
he's
watched
acquitting. Okay. He thinks America kills people.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like, oh, I mean death to killing.
Yes.
Right? Isn't that whatever? It's the dumbest thing ever.
Okay. I hear you.
And obviously, he wants to take down America and subvert America's power, America's hegemony,
Yeah.
destroy America. We know this is an active enemy. And fine, maybe Pezeshkian, that's his name, he's maybe less of a hardliner than Khomeini, but he is no less an enemy of the state.
Okay.
And this is a civilian, a citizen of the U.S. collaborating with this person, platforming him. Why is that not an act of treason? We wouldn't all the time, America, maybe you disagree with this, but all the time, America is trying to fight, let's say, Chinese interference, Russian interference in elections, and, posting all sorts of things about this politician that they don't want. Are you okay? Are you not okay with them criminalizing that sort of thing?
Wait. Who's them? Who's
America
avoid pronouns?
Criminalizing foreign state actors' interference in the media and pushing their anti-American narrative, trying to subvert.
They're doing it with like cyber warfare, or they're doing it.
Yeah, sure. They have bot farming, that are posting all of these things. They have fake false information that they propose about this
Well,
candidate that they don't like, that wouldn't be good for them.
Well, first of all, non-citizens don't get the same free speech protections. Foreign actors don't get the same free speech protections, and that makes sense.
Well, it's difficult when it comes to Facebook because that's an international platform. So what do you allow? Or are you saying that there should be different standards for Facebook in America for American citizens versus non-American?
Well, what does it mean to criminalize these actions by foreign people, by foreign countries? What
It's
is
forcing
what-
Facebook to delete these things, criminalizing Facebook if they know about it and they don't, like fining Tucker Carlson,
fining?
giving a warning. I
So,
don't know.
wait,
You don't
forcing-
have to
forcing
jump to
Facebook-
jail, but there's a ladder of.
Wait, so forcing Facebook to delete the material that was posted by bots created by Russia or by China, or not by bots, even if it's real people, That's one thing.
Well, I call them bots, but it could be like 1,000 people working on a farm.
Okay.
They're real people, but they're
Yeah,
acting
that's
like
that's why I
bots.
said even if they're not bots, even if they're just foreign people from a foreign country just trying to meddle,
Infiltrate.
yeah, spread propaganda to the American public. Okay, so forcing Facebook to delete them. What else might the United States government do?
Like, criminalize it. I mean, you don't have to lock up Mark Zuckerberg, but there are penalties.
Penalties for Facebook.
For Facebook, for Tucker Carlson, I don't know, maybe the Iranian president isn't sufficient. I think it is, but there's certain precedent. Like, I remember apparently Barbara, someone or other, or I heard some other journalist in the 90s did an interview with Arafat, and it wasn't considered like, actually, I don't know, I wasn't there. It was controversial, but no one considered her a threat. And I would venture to say, the matter of journalistic freedom also depends on how the journalist actually feels about it. If you have a pro-Palestinian ISIS supporter, whatever it is, platform, and he happens to be a reporter, and he's interviewing an ISIS member, then that's more problematic than someone who's, part of the free press and doesn't really have a horse in the race, and they're interviewing this person.
It's more problematic from a social opinion perspective, from a
No, I think from a state
a legal perspective.
legal perspective,
That's tough. Why? I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about that. If you're in your rights,
because that means it's your intention to bring this person on to subvert and spread his propaganda to take down the state, versus someone who's going to challenge them and say, why are you saying this? This could be dangerous.
well, again, I don't see the legal standard here because I don't think that you can necessarily attribute intention to take down the country or to destroy the country or its citizens just by interviewing somebody.
But this is the person you're interviewing has said in the past, "Death to America, let's take down America." If they say in the interview, we should kill all Americans, that you're not okay with. But if they say outside of the interview,
I didn't say I was not okay with that.
sorry, shouldn't be criminalized.
If they say in the interview
Yeah.
that I want to kill all the Americans,
Yes. Is there a precedent to give them a penalty, even though? Yeah.
but it's complicated here because who's getting the penalty? The person interviewing them, because the person who said I want to kill all the Americans is not an American citizen.
Well, it would be much less. It would be a matter of, wait, did they know they were going to say that?
Yeah.
Maybe the person they are interviewing is an American. I don't know.
I will grant you, you're asking tough questions. You're
choice.
coming up with very specific, tough scenarios.
Well, I mean, it
No,
happens.
it's good. It's good. I'm
Right, but I'm not just like pulling this out of my butt. This is something that like I felt also when watching this whole interview.
Okay, fine. So keep going. Well, meaning the person who the ISIS member or the ISIS head, he says in the interview, "I want to kill all the Americans." Now, is that protected under free speech? Well, it doesn't really matter because this person's not an American citizen.
But okay, so then the person interviewing, obviously it'd be a matter of, did he know he was going to say this? Is it live? Is he disseminating this after? Is he doing it in a way that doesn't glorify it but show how ridiculous and dangerous this other person is?
But I think because that all is very difficult to identify, and you can always claim you're showing it for the purposes of showing how bad it is. Yeah, I think it's probably protected under free speech for the interviewer. I think the interviewer. I don't.
But you said before that at the beginning of the whole conversation that it's a matter of reasonability, and if a reasonable person would say this is a threat, this is dangerous, then we should judge their right to free speech accordingly. And then I said, I agree that. I said, I think this is all subjective, because reasonability, it's still all going to be subjective and up to the person and up to debate, and that's why it's so difficult, and it comes down to really whether it's harmful or not. So I was actually saying, like you just said, it's a subjective thing, but then you just said, no, it's subjective, so therefore it shouldn't, you can't have laws of free speech against its free speech.
Against this particular case. Yeah, because I've been trying to communicate that my standards are much stricter than yours when it comes to incitement to violence. When I'm imagining a case of incitement to violence that I would say, okay, that is definitely not protected under free speech, I'm imagining something much more egregious than I think you are allowing for. Simply indirect causation that someone could say, hey, there's possible, this possibly causes people to be harmed or to commit acts of violence. It has to be like directed, specific. It has to be like the person told the other person to go and like kill all the Americans or whatever, to do something bad.
So if the ISIS guy said, I want to kill all Americans, that's fine. But if he says, you, John, I want you to kill all the Americans.
During an interview?
Yeah.
But who's John? It depends who John
Oh, all
is.
of a sudden it depends. So you agree that depends on the person. You had just said before, you're placing so many subjective constraints on this case that therefore we can't apply free speech or laws at all because it's so tough to pin down and actually prosecute.
No, I was saying it's unprosecutable because you cannot prove that this person was intending to spread incitement to kill Americans. They could claim that they were just interviewing this person to expose his hatred and to...
Okay, so why did you just say it depends who John is?
It depends who John is. It depends what the relationship between John and this person is. It depends how reasonable it is that John would listen to this person. It depends...
But you just said he could always claim that he was just interviewing to show how ridiculous he is.
Hold on.
But you're saying...
John is the interviewer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the ISIS guy.
That's what I'm saying. I have no idea who the interviewer's name is.
This guy from ISIS.
No, but who
goes by
John is the cameraman, the other person, the producer, some other guy
the
sitting
American
there.
citizen.
Who's the interviewer? That's my point. I'm just asking you to be specific. John is the interviewer. That's what I'm trying to get at. It depends. Depends who John is. Is John some random person? Okay, John is the interviewer.
So yeah, so you said it's not easily prosecutable.
No,
It
stop.
depends who he is.
Stop. I've clarified my point. I now need to explain. So if John is the interviewer, and no, once I know who the interviewer is, that's all I needed. That's all I needed. I didn't know who John was. Now he's the interviewer, so now I can think about it. The guy during the interview says to John,
What I might have just incited violence. I don't know. I'm kidding.
I think we got to stay clear. I have no
Stay
idea.
clear.
You're
Definitions
jumping
are
ahead. I have
important.
no idea what you're talking
I
about.
agree.
All right. The interviewer says to John, the ISIS guy says to John, who is the interviewer, go kill all the Americans. Well, but then, oh no. So then does John then go and kill Americans? That's the question. Again, the ISIS guy isn't even an American citizen. It's tough for the government to prosecute him under any incitement to violence or any charge like that. Especially, is this interview even happening in America? Maybe the guy's maybe it's happening over Zoom. But anyway, so he's talking to John, and John is the interviewer, and he tells John to go commit acts of violence. Again, there's nothing going on here, unless John actually commits acts of violence. In which case, it's not a free speech question at all. It's just,
Okay,
of course,
fine.
if John murders somebody, then
Right.
we're going to prosecute him.
Fine. Not John. He just tells everyone who's listening. He just says, if you're listening, I want you to all kill Americans. You know who you are or something.
Okay. So now can we prosecute John for him saying this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because obviously, yes,
I
if
don't know,
John
it's,
went to kill people, then there'd be bigger issues.
I think probably not, but maybe it depends on how it's shared, how it's
Disseminated.
Thank you. That's the word. How is there maybe a disclaimer before that says not for children, inflammatory material, something like that. It depends. It depends on a lot of things. You can't just immediately say, "Oh, the interviewer did something wrong" by having this guy on. And even like if it's just posted on a platform with the whole interview, and inside the interview the ISIS guy says "Death to Americans." That's really what I believe. I want to kill all the Americans, especially if it's like embedded in some hour-long video. Yeah, I don't think that's incitement to violence. I think that the interviewer didn't do anything legally wrong. It's possible that there could be public outcry. It could be that the marketplace of ideas will say, "Hey, this was very poorly handled, and this was in bad taste," and that's good. The marketplace of ideas should say that. But yeah, from a legal perspective, I think that this is sounding pretty fine to me. It would have to be like, depending on the implementation, there would have to be something really egregious for me to say like, hey, maybe this is legally prosecutable as incitement to violence.
Okay, so let's, I guess, talk more about that mob mentality that you just brought up, which is, you said it's the marketplace of ideas. I think it could
Very
easily
different,
be
very different from mob mentality.
mob mentality. What? That's exactly what it is. It's the public consensus, and it could
No,
get
there's a difference between public consensus and mob mentality. The two things one can morph into the other. They're not. There's a lot of overlap there.
So what's the definition?
Well, there's a few ways to explain it, but when the public are all acting independently, each person is kind of acting independently, each person is acting rationally from their own rational thought, from their own way of concluding the situation. It just happens to be that the overwhelming majority of people think a certain way. That would be public consensus. That is not mob mentality.
Which is very unrealistic, because no one actually, like, the public does not reach its conclusions by each person receiving independent, unbiased information and him contemplating about. No, it's news media broadcasting whatever story bias that they want, every narrative they want to push. You have different people yelling at each other on some podcast, some news channel, which is which, and then people who are watching at home reaching some conclusion based off of like what they heard their neighbors say, what their friends say, what they're afraid to say, if they want to go along with the consensus because they don't want to be seen as going against, so it's not. There's no situation where everyone acts rationally, independently, and unbiasedly. So it ultimately converges to mob mentality, whatever the public consensus is.
Well, I was giving you the kind of clear picture of what mob mentality is not, even though it's public consensus. Now, I'm not saying that is what happens. Now, there's another end of the spectrum, which is definitely mob-like behavior from the public, where really there's this emotion that gets stirred up among a lot of people, and people are not behaving independently. They're not thinking for themselves, and everyone gets stirred up in this group think and this group emotion. And it very much is like a mob. It's acting like a mob. Everyone is just acting together. There's no dissenting voices among the mob. That is the other end of the spectrum where it's clearly a mob. Now, that's the best I can do. I gave you the difference. I gave you these two things are different. Now, it's true that the reality is complicated, and it's sometimes there's a lot of overlap. Sometimes it's difficult to exactly say like, okay, are people acting rationally here, et cetera? But very often when a mob starts to erupt, you can usually identify it. I think we're pretty good at that. And when it's just that the majority of people went a certain way or felt a certain way, and they can even be stirred up, they can even be emotional. But if it's a genuine emotion, an emotion based in reality, and also that there's restraint, that like no one's going marching with pitchforks and murdering anybody or canceling anybody, but just using.
Well, if they're murdering people, then it's a different case, and we're not talking free speech.
I'm just talking about whether something's a mob or whether something's just.
And you're saying it's
a healthier behavior from a large group.
You're defining it as two ends of a spectrum.
I'm defining it as two ends of a spectrum, and
pure political consensus, independent, rational thinking of a group, and then they vote independently, come to some conclusion. Mob at the other end, just a bunch of brainless zombies.
Yeah.
Acting in such a manner that they just destroy everything in their path to achieve their goal. And reality, you're saying, is somewhere along this spectrum.
Yeah, but the fact that we can identify the two ends of that spectrum, right? I started by saying there's a marketplace of ideas, and if the marketplace of ideas gives a pushback to this interviewer and says this was poorly handled, this was in bad taste, this sends the wrong message, that sort of thing. People write this on social media, people write this wherever, people talk about this around the dinner table. That is fine. And then you use the word mob mentality, and I took issue with that because that's not necessarily a mob. A public outcry, a bunch of people having a response to something is not necessarily a mob. And then you asked me for, well, what really is the difference? How do I explain it? And I explained it, even though, of course, the two ends of the spectrum don't necessarily happen exactly like that. But there is clearly a difference here. There's a moral difference. And to the extent that the reality is more towards this way or more towards that way, it's more of a mob or more of people acting rationally, even though they might all be acting similarly.
But I think even in the case of the reaction to Tucker Carlson, but I was extending it to the reaction and pushback that we see in many cases, that it's not as pure as you just made it sound, so that's why I was pushing back on it, because I do think there are so many factors involved when people make their decision about what they're afraid to say, how they come to this conclusion, that I didn't want to ignore that. But the reason why so that's why I just threw out mob mentality, because not just that case, maybe you could, there are certain cases where it's not as, where people aren't reacting in an irrational, emotional, impulsive way, as opposed to more rational argument, debate. But there are plenty of those cases, and that's why I want to bring up the next point, which is cancel culture,
Okay.
and the public opinion not necessarily being one that is doing the right thing. In which case, to me, mob mentality, which okay, maybe it is the zombie thing, but it's also certain and being pressured to do something that isn't necessarily right.
Okay.
So a group of society reaching a conclusion that isn't the right or ethical thing to do. It's just what it's just the consensus that's been reached for many reasons. So, for one example, I think any gossip mongering regarding celebrities, and we spoke about this before, I think that's a mob mentality phenomenon, because everyone knows it's wrong to talk about other people if they're not doing anything wrong, to invade their private lives. But it's gone to such an extreme that people are like, yeah, we're all on board with this, aren't we? Like, we want this. It's just what we want. It's our impulse. Emotionally, we love gossip, talking about people, airing out their dirty laundry, even if it's not right. I could probably bring up other examples.
Well, what's the point? What's the point about gossip and paparazzi?
The point is that the majority of people think that celebrities should be treated however people want, and that they're like servants of the people, and we could air out their dirty laundry. Mm-hmm. That's like a mob mentality, because it's not ethical, it's not right, but it's become, through the marketplace of ideas that you celebrate, it's become the default and the accepted stance.
Yes, there can be kind of decisions that a culture makes that are actually wrong. Yeah. It's not. Okay, it's not always the case that there's like the
sure,
like
but
the
you were glorifying it before and saying like, "Oh, this is great," that the public comes to a consensus, and that's how things. That's how harmful statements should be treated. That's the real way to handle things, not criminalize them, mm-hmm. but have people come together and through rationality, independent thought, reach the conclusion that this is not a good thing for us to continue to inseminate, to consume, to produce, mm-hmm. and we're not going to incriminate it, but we're going to take steps as a society to not allow this. I don't think that's a dependable mechanism at all because of mob mentality issues.
Okay, so...
And subjectivity.
It's a good point. I hear what you're saying. That sometimes a collective wisdom may win out among a society. Sometimes what the general public decides is something good, and sometimes what the general public decides might be something bad. Now, I do think that over time, when push comes to shove, the collective wisdom will win out. I don't think that democracy has any chance of being a decent system of government if that wasn't the case. And also, there's a certain when you think about the individual as well, the individual in certain contexts, when they're thinking about certain things, they might let themselves go a little more, and they might speak a certain way. They might not be as refined of a person. They might make jokes about who knows, like inappropriate jokes, or maybe even somewhat off-color jokes or socially unacceptable jokes. But then at the end of the day, like they do know what's up, and it's sort of like just something they kind of get out of their system sometimes, or maybe it's just a character flaw. Like they just have it and they let it out in certain contexts. But when push comes to shove, when they understand that the situation is serious, when they understand that they have to, okay, I now have to go into sort of like real talk and my real state of mind, actually have to think about things seriously, then they'll do that. A lot of people are like this. Maybe everyone is like this to a certain extent. And the public can be like that as well, right? The public can say, okay, when push comes to shove, people are going to come through and people are going to work together and come to the right decision when there's really something harmful that needs to be addressed. But when it comes to kind of like the gossip magazines, that's one of the things that the society is still kind of, okay, it's like the kind of thing that they're just using to let go. They're using to let their less refined aspects of themselves kind of have room to breathe, as long as it's handled, within limitations, and as long as it doesn't become out of control or become dangerous or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk a bit more about mob mentality in terms of danger. I'm just going to throw this out there. Should someone be allowed to burn a Quran?
I think so. Yeah.
In public?
I think so.
That they own, of course. Should someone be able to burn a Torah scroll?
I think so. Meaning from a legal perspective. Now, the Jewish community has the utmost right to be super offended, as the Muslim community has the utmost right to be super offended by the first one. And yeah, I mean, I think that there should be social consequences to that for sure. But yeah, I think, I don't think I'm gonna say that person should be locked up for that.
Okay, so burning any religious garb, burning if they own it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Doing a big bonfire in public of Jewish books.
Yeah. Again, social consequences should be severe, but yeah, I'll stay consistent on the legality of free speech there. I'm in favor of a very lax definition of free speech from a legal perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it came to drawing Muhammad, okay, you said, oh, the Muslim community does have a right to be outraged by burning Qurans, okay?
For sure.
What about drawing Muhammad?
Well, I think you have a right to be outraged against anything.
Okay.
Like, of course, you always have a right to be outraged.
Okay. Do you see any connection between when Charlie Hebdo drew the pictures of Muhammad in France, and then that sparked outcry from the Muslim community, widespread anger, and then a few days later, Islamists went into the offices of Charlie Hebdo and started murdering everyone. Mm-hmm. Do you see any connection between the outrage of the Muslim community at something so small as drawing a picture of Muhammad and the resulting terrorism?
I definitely see a connection, but there's nothing to talk about there about Charlie Hebdo himself.
No, I'm talking about the Muslim community's response to be outraged.
Yeah, I understand, but what speech are we talking about that should be curtailed?
Not necessarily talking about. I'm not saying we should curtail Charlie Hebdo. In fact, I very much I'm very much in support of them drawing such things. But the fact that I'm talking more, maybe it's shifting gears a little bit, but I'm talking about how you said, yeah, the Muslim community has every right to be outraged. Maybe I'm coming at a different angle. I'm coming at the angle of, what some people say, free speech is the very fact that we should be allowed to say offensive things and that people shouldn't be offended by it. I think there was a more accurate free speech thing. I think Rowan Atkinson had a bunch of stuff about that. He would always do comedic comedic routines that would be offensive. He said the best way to increase resistance to offensive speech is to allow more of it, building immunity to offense rather than relying on laws to suppress criticism. So he's like pushing for a free speech thing, but not only is he saying we should allow free speech, but we should also push back on people who get offended by such things.
Okay, yeah.
And so is there a point where like you would say, no, the Muslim community shouldn't be offended
Okay,
by
so
such things
so
because it's dangerous
So-
to be so offended by something that it leads to zealous, crazy people who shoot everything.
okay, so we're not talking legally. We're not talking, when you say you have a right to be offended at a comic, we're not talking legally. We're talking whether, something else.
Well, I would even say if after they published these the comics with Muhammad, if there are now rallies outside by Muslims that are saying, chanting things, and it reaches the point where this is a dangerous crowd,
Yeah,
then the police should crack down.
yeah, I think so too.
You think, oh, okay, because that's sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of
No.
a challenge to what you're saying, which is
No,
they should be allowed to be offended,
not at all. Okay.
and
You-
even
you
if they
asked-
haven't killed anyone yet, it's still the police should step in. I don't think it's so crazy.
You're conflating being offended and a crowd that starts to become looking dangerous in a public space that starts to become violent, and the police should do something about that. It's two very different scenarios. You asked initially whether the Muslim community has the right to be offended by Charlie Hebdo's comics. The answer is of course. Like if they're offended, they can be like, hey, we hate this. This is terrible. We're very offended by this. They can give some whole whatever they want. They can attack it from all different angles. They can talk about how insensitive this is and how most Muslims aren't terrorists. Whatever talking points they want to give.
Okay, but that reaches a point where they start picketing, where they start.
Okay, everything. Okay, you can't. If you eat a hamburger.
No, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have any right to be offended at all. I'm not saying we should criminalize that. I'm saying we should be wary. We should be.
What does be wary mean?
That the police should be wary of when taking offense to things could be a dangerous thing.
Anytime any group of people are protesting and the energy starts becoming very negative and very aggressive, and there starts being a danger of, hey, what's going to happen here? The police should be on guard. And in general, when people, in general, you have to announce your protests, at least in some scenarios, so that there can be security. There's a lot of, I guess, fine print around, like if you want to protest in specific places, in public places, particularly if you're going to have a lot of people. I don't know how all of that works. But you generally, for the sake of public safety, you often, obviously, anyway, there are going to be police on the streets, generally speaking. But yeah, you want to be a little bit wary of protests. Some protests are very peaceful, very mild, and they don't look like they're going to escalate into anything. And yeah, there have been protests throughout history that look like they are in danger of escalating. And there are officers on duty who, the job is, you make a judgment call. You say, like, okay, how much should I be doing to keep this under control? The Boston Massacre, the so-called Boston Massacre, a bit of a hyperbole there, but the so-called Boston Massacre that occurred right before the American Revolution. It was a large mob of people.
Oh, you're not talking about the marathon?
No, that's called something else usually, Boston Marathon bombing or something. So the Boston Massacre, which occurred right before the American Revolution, it was a bunch of people. It was essentially a mob that was getting more and more riled up and intimidating more and more a group of British soldiers to the point where at first there was one shot that was fired and then several shots that fired, and several of the protesters, although you could call them rioters, I think, were killed. And most of the British soldiers, by the way, were let off in colonial America shortly before the American Revolution because there was definitely reason to believe that they were acting in self-defense. So yeah, these scenarios happen all the time. The point is, I think you're...
So let me clarify something.
Okay.
And maybe it's going to sound a little controversial. maybe a little spicy take, but this is a specific community that when they get offended by certain things, such as drawing pictures of Muhammad, there is a higher likelihood that a violent reaction will follow.
Okay.
There are other communities that if you, from my understanding, if you burn a picture of Jesus, I don't know, maybe they're Catholicism, Christianity, I guess, is a bigger umbrella term. They have more zealous cults and less zealous cults, sure.
Okay.
So I can't say for sure that no matter where you burn a picture of Jesus, that you wouldn't be murdered. You might be, like in certain communities.
You can't imagine a place where if you burned a picture of Jesus, you wouldn't be or would be murdered.
You would be murdered.
You would be. Okay, yeah.
But my intuition tells me it exists. But my intuition also tells me it's much less likely, especially if in the Western world, if you produce a picture of Jesus doing something, I don't know, pornographic, or something of Moses doing something pornographic,
Okay.
you're way less likely to elicit a violent murder response than you are
Sure.
a picture. So,
Okay.
okay.
Go on.
So it's not just, each protest in its own, each rally in its own, we have to be wary of certain. I'm talking about certain aspects of, and certain groups that, I don't know, I'm still not saying we should not let Muslims be outraged.
Because what would that even mean?
Right. It doesn't mean that we can criminalize everyone who, but if they send a letter to the editor, then sure, we shouldn't crack down on that. But if they start protesting, then I would treat that differently and make that more, I would have the police crack down on that more than if you have the same protest from a different group that doesn't have that same history of promoting violence.
I might post additional police, which I wouldn't post for a protest from a different group, from like a Christian group. But I don't crack down on it more until it actually shows that it's out of line. I might produce greater precautions for myself because I'm a little bit more wary of this. But that's my own business as being head of security in this particular city or being the police chief or whatever it is. That has nothing to do with I haven't infringed on anybody's rights here. That's my own business as somebody who's in charge of security here. Yeah, okay. There was something that insulted Muhammad in the comic strips. The Muslim community I know is outraged. There's going to be a protest by Muslims at this particular location. Yeah, that's something that activates my alert system in my head. That has nothing to do with like the legality or even the morality of the protest by this particular Muslim group or the outrage that one might feel against a particular comic strip or the comic strip itself. The editor of the comic strip and the cartoonist, whoever they are perfectly in their rights to ridicule Muhammad in a comic strip. Religious people are perfectly in their rights to not be okay with it. They are perfectly in their rights to protest about it. The police chief is perfectly in his rights to allocate a few additional resources for security when it comes to a Muslim group protesting in this particular context in reaction to this particular event, because it does seem to be a bit of a hairy situation. All of this is totally fine.
What if, let's take it to an extreme, not any particular group. Let's say statistically every time, or 99.99% of the time, that this group of people, again, not any group, I'm not thinking of this as an extreme case, every time they protested, it led to people getting killed, violent clashes. Mm-hmm. Are you ever going to be in favor of banning that protest, banning those people from protesting?
Banning a particular group of people from protesting? No.
Even if they have a 99.99% history of...
I don't believe in judging groups. I only believe in judging individuals. You find the individuals who cause the problem, you arrest those individuals. Perhaps you don't allow them to attend additional future protests, but but using a sort of a religious label or an ethnic label or whatever have you, that
It's whatever they are, picketing around, whatever they're rallying around. So it's not, I'm not assigning anything to it's whatever case they're rallying for.
yeah, but I think you are assigning something to them when you suggest that this entire group of people are no longer allowed to protest. The people who did bad things, maybe
Well,
they.
I'm saying not this group of people, I'm saying the group of protesters specifically, not that they represent some community of people that didn't protest. I'm saying the protesters themselves. Yeah.
Well, only if they committed acts of violence or hurt people. But anyone who was there peacefully and wasn't arrested, yeah, they can continue to protest. I don't believe in judging groups. Like this group can no longer protest. Individuals, it's all about the individual. So I might apply a blacklist to every single individual in this group and say, all of you, I'm never going to approve a license for a public gathering to any of you particular individuals. Again, although I guess you could have like a club or something that kind of has some sort of entity like a corporation, a club, an organization. You can treat that as an individual as well.
So what's your method? You've seen videos of people getting into scraps, fights, being beaten in rallies, riots, protests.
Yeah.
It's often like a sudden escalation. It's not always so clear who started what, who provoked who. It's a subjective call. What do you do about that? Do you crack down on anyone who, on both sides? Is it only if one of the sides wants to file charges against the other? You're saying deal with each violent individual.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
You judge each individual according to his actions.
But is it anyone who's done something violent, or only what people that are and therefore are seen as a threat, or is it only those that are like bringing charges? You're saying the police should look through footage if there is footage.
Yeah, it depends.
And arrest accordingly.
There are lots of things that are going to be ignored by the state unless somebody brings charges. There's some things that might not be ignored by the state, that it doesn't require somebody to bring charges. The state is going to look into this. Depends on the magnitude, depends on the severity.
So like if someone is waving a flag from the opposing side, one person...
What's the opposing side?
You have two protests.
Okay.
There's a counter-protest. Each sees the other as a counter-protest, whatever it is. Each one sees the other flag as incitement, or just one person sees the other guy's flag as incitement, attacks him or something. Is it the first person to throw the punch that is ultimately the one considered the violent one and in the wrong?
Probably. But you can
But
be...
it could be self-defense.
Yeah, it could be. Depends. I don't think we're talking about free speech right now. We're talking about...
I think it's exactly free speech. I'm saying you're saying we should crack down on individual violent protesters within a rally, and yeah, that's pretty simple, because we shouldn't crack down on the whole rally itself and say this is leading to issues, troubles, therefore we're banning it. Saying just deal with each individual case. And I'm pushing back on that, saying I've looked at those videos. I've seen them. It depends when you start filming the video, at which point it could be framed differently from different angles, who provoked who. And then what you get is a result. It's a situation where you can't actually crack down on violence. It's just such a can of worms that it's always just going to be easier to make blanket statements about the rally, and because I don't think you'll usually get anywhere with cracking down on individual protesters, because usually you don't. They wind up half the time arresting the wrong people, the wrong side that didn't really incite, or it was both sides that incited, but only one filed charges or something. It's just it's an entire mess, is my point, and that policy-wise, it just makes more sense to treat the group as a whole.
Maybe. I don't know. This doesn't really seems to me to be a meaningful objection to free speech. If in the name of public safety, the people in charge of security make a pragmatic decision to say, we're not going to allow this protest, or we're going to only allow this protest in a particular place, or we're going to identify all these people, we're going to get the names of all these people, and anytime they organize another protest, we're going to monitor it very closely. Maybe we'll even disallow it. All of that is probably okay. I don't think that's really first of all, I don't think you're prosecuting anybody based on the speech that they've said or their opinions. In addition, you're not really censoring as well, because you're still allowing that expression of opinion to be spread and to be said. You're just focusing on the issue of violence at protests and how that plays out in the public sector. And yeah, there are definitely a lot of considerations to be had there. But the fact that those considerations need to be made is not doesn't mean that there's I don't know. I'm not fully certain what your point is.
I think I don't know. I think I'm being pretty clear. I think you're pushing back on saying your side. I don't think my point is easily dismissible. I just think that you said your side of it, and
but when it comes
we can
to
move on. So I don't know. Which I want to ask.
I wasn't trying to just dismiss your point. I was saying I'm not sure what it is. I'm saying you're welcome to clarify.
Well, I did clarify, so.
All right,
so we can move on, because I think I did my best to clarify. I don't think it's going to get any clearer. But I do want to ask you about, let's say, blocking traffic or something for protests. You mentioned like the police should have the, of course they should. Well, I don't know. So of course it's not so, obvious that free speech should be restricted to a time and place. But what do you think about blocking traffic for protests, seeing as...
If you ask for approval beforehand, maybe you can get it. Maybe you can block off traffic for a particular protest. It depends on the discretion of the mayor or the whoever's in charge of these things. Unlawfully blocking traffic, definitely wrong. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, what if it's such an important, vital issue that if you just protest in your, the area that they give you and they allot you, no one's really going to see, you're not going to make the news, it's not going to actually do anything. If this is such like a critical thing, and obviously that's a subjective thing, but if you feel the country is falling apart, people's lives are at stake, then I don't know. Maybe
then what?
Then you want to protest on the streets and
block traffic without permission.
Yeah, not harm people necessarily in a violent way, but send a clear message, because otherwise you won't be heard. And I don't know, I guess the thing there might be, okay, get arrested and just deal with the consequences, or should we as a society recognize that sometimes these things are allowed and or are important enough that the police shouldn't crack down on them or arrest them?
No, I disagree. Well, certainly any of the examples that come to my head from recent years, I completely disagree. People come up with all sorts of nonsense rationalizations in their head as to that the country they live in, that they have tremendous prosperity from and they have great lives in, compared to other countries and compared to other times in the past. They come up with all sorts of ridiculous rationalizations about why this country is actually the most terrible thing in the world, and they have to block traffic, they have to burn down buildings, they have to destroy in order to fight the terrible oppressive United States, or something like that. I'm completely unmoved by all recent examples of that. So my inclination is to say, like, no, if you don't have permission, it's illegal. You're not allowed to block traffic. Now, there could be something that is that important if the society you live in truly does, meaning the moral sentiment is not entirely impossible. Obviously, in some ways, colonial America's revolution against the British Empire was kind of like that. It was kind of saying, the situation that we live in, the legal structure that we live in is immoral in a sense. We now reject it, so we're going to create our own. But first of all, you have to be willing to create your own. You have to be willing to take on that responsibility to create your own.
And not just destroy.
Yeah, not just destroy. And also the idea, like the sort of doing it, but then demanding public approval for it, like saying, "Yeah, we're breaking the law, but you should all approve of it, and we should avoid consequences because racism, it's systemic racism." It's all just a giant contradiction. If you really believe in it, then you take the consequences as well, like the American colonialists were willing to do when they actually went to war with the British Empire. So. Like if you feel that the structure around you is so immoral that it needs to be overthrown, then actually live by that and actually pay the consequences for it and actually rebel, but you'll fail probably. But if you're not willing to pay the consequences, then stop annoying everybody else.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean that you think they should protest on the street and then just get arrested? Because they should put their money
I don't think that's what they should do.
Is. No, not what they should do, but not because you agree with their opinions, but given that they believe in it personally, they themselves should do that because they should put their money where their mouth is.
That would at least be a more respectable thing to do. I don't know what they should do. Depends who they are.
Okay, I'm using the word "should" in that sense. Then yes.
It's a more respectable thing to do, yes. To do the illegal thing and then be willing to pay the consequences for it because you believe so much in what you're fighting for. Fine, if you believe so much in it, pay the consequences.
Okay. Let's talk comedy for a second.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm glad. This is a good
a
lighter topic to jump into.
Right. Well, because I'm looking at I have more topics and examples I could give. And to ask, whether they should be allowed or not, but because you have a more of a lenient position on whether or not something really causes harm, then I don't know. A lot of these questions don't become as relevant, I guess. But when it comes to comedy, I guess. So that's why I wasn't sure. Even comedy, I thought you would just say, "Oh, well." Everything's allowed in comedy.
No, I am probably going to say that, but still, it's at least
okay. Sure, it's later.
Something interesting to touch on. But I am probably going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I get up on the stage and I say, "Hey everyone, Cal has a small brain.
Okay.
A very tiny small brain. I've seen it, very small."
What really matters is the neural connections in your brain. It doesn't actually the size. It does.
A whale has a
large brain.
A way larger brain than the human body.
There you go.
So it's the proportion or something, and the connections, like you said.
Yeah.
So I get up on there. Now you said celebrities should be treated differently than, and they are treated differently than.
Actually, I want to go back to that if we could. Because I don't want you to just celebrities should be treated differently. I'm not. I brought that up as they are treated differently under the law. I'm pretty sure, and there might be some good reasons for that. Because why is it okay to spread a rumor or whatever you want to call it that Donald Trump was a Epstein client as opposed to Benji Wexler? Well, it's because there's already so much information out there about Trump, and there's all sorts of stuff out there about Trump.
So it's not because he's a public figure necessarily, it's because of evidence?
I'm explaining, yeah, exactly. I'm explaining the rationale. Because there's already so much stuff out there, there's all sorts of things you could say could be reasonable conclusions from the stuff that's out there. But when it comes to Benji, there's not that much out there. So it's much harder to say, yeah, this was a reasonable thing to conclude. I concluded this based on the evidence. It's much harder to claim that than to claim that you're just out to ruin Benji's reputation, and this was libel that you're just spreading to harm somebody. So because Donald Trump is a public figure, there's a lot of things that I could claim about him that I would say, and if anybody came to me and said, aren't you just spreading harmful rumors about Donald Trump? I would say, are you kidding? Let me pull up what he said in 1970 in this interview with Oprah Winfrey. Then let me pull up this story about him. Let me pull up. There's tons of information out there. There's so much that I could say is evidence for whatever I'm claiming. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what it really is about. That celebrities tend to get. Maybe it's not that celebrities automatically get. Meaning that there's more you can say about them without being incriminated, without being prosecuted. But simply pragmatically, that's the way it often happens because of the plausible deniability around celebrities, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. It could also be that it just won't spread as far if you come out with an accusation about me. It's just not going to be as harmful to me because no one's really going to care or listen. Whereas I'm probably not going to see much financial loss as opposed to celebrity. But I mean, I still disagree. I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that celebrities, just simply by being more famous, does not mean that they should be any more vulnerable. I think that they should go after everyone that came out. I think how it works is, one video comes out and then another video comes out, and then people feel comfortable. They say, oh, well, there wouldn't be so many videos out unless, clearly I could say something and continue and jump on this bandwagon of libeling someone. I think everyone plays a part in that. I think they should all be held responsible if they are saying things that are alleged, and if they are saying things that haven't been, shown in a court of law. And I guess I'm pretty extreme on this. I could be seen as extreme, probably both sides of the aisle, because I'm more about privacy and innocent until proven guilty, and it's liable otherwise. So I understand why people would disagree with me and why it kind of flies in the face of pretty much half the content out there, which is just about what this celebrity did, without like hard evidence that's really been through trial, been looked at, without like due process. It's just everyone's talking about everyone, and there's not much you could actually do about it. But that's how I feel about it. So when it comes to, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah.
Okay.
In general, by the way, I think it's not good when there's something illegal that is so widespread that it's impractical to prosecute it all. So according to your standard of libel, I would say that it becomes impossible to prosecute all of it. So there's something wrong with that. That a society shouldn't make something illegal that it's just impractical to properly enforce. It weakens the strength of laws. It weakens that relationship between the society and the law book.
Right.
Once something.
I see that pragmatic approach, but from a principled approach, I would still hold out. I would say, there have been plenty of times, though, that society has been wrong throughout history, and it's been impossible to actually change that, or very impractical, very unlikely, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't. But I hear your point as well about it weakening, trivializing the law if we say something's illegal that we can't actually enforce. But
Right.
I mean, that's
Okay.
what libel is. It's something that's very hard to enforce. We should still try it. They still do try. Oftentimes they fail, but at least
they try with a strict standard. That isn't the standard that you laid out. It's a number of conditions that need to be met, and you said it's innocent until proven guilty for the person who is being talked about.
Yeah, meaning if you come out with a video saying this person did this, even if you say allegedly, like putting that little star next to it, everyone knows what you're doing, and you're still causing immense harm that you shouldn't just be able to get out of by putting an asterisk next to it.
I'm just trying to clarify. When you said innocent until proven guilty, that was talking about the person being talked about.
Yes.
And therefore that was a standard against the person spreading libel. The person spreading libel kind of becomes guilty until proven innocent, because he has to prove now that his libel was correct, was true.
Again, I'm still, not super aboard it's only libel if it's not true. So, but yeah, I mean, if you're talking about someone in a negative way, the proof is in the pudding. It's right there. You don't have to prove that no one has to prove that you spoke about them in a negative way. Like that very action itself you're guilty of. Whether like the amount of harm done is something that could be debated, and that's what they would definitely do in a court of law. But
Well, so I'm quite certain that the way, at least it works in the U.S., is the person who spread the libel is innocent until proven guilty. That act of spreading so-called libel hasn't it's not called libel yet because it hasn't been proven that in court. That act of spreading some harmful rumor about somebody is assumed innocent. The person who is aggrieved has to prove that it was with malintent and that it's not true, and that the person should have reasonably known that it was not true. It's a very high burden of proof on the person who is aggrieved to bring a case of libel against somebody, which I know is not according to what you're trying.
I agree. It still is hard, and I agree that it should be difficult. I'm not saying it should be super easy, just prosecute anyone that ever said anything about anyone ever in a negative fashion. I don't know how much easier we should make it than it already is now. Maybe a little bit easier, because clearly I don't think people care enough. Media corporations don't care enough about the harm that they're actually causing to people, so there's clearly, in my opinion, something very wrong with the system. Yes, like anyone going through the justice system, they should be innocent until proven guilty. Even the person spreading the libel, yes, they have to go through due process as well. I'm not saying lock them up without a strong case being shown against them. I was just saying it shouldn't be as difficult as it is, I guess, to look at the person and say, come on, you knew that this was a harmful thing that you're saying. You knew that this would cause damage. And again, I don't even think that whether it's true or not should be really part of the case. Like, let's say it's not known that it was true at the time. Why should that, if it's not known that it's true at the time, then, and it's not confirmed, then why does it matter that just because later it was shown to be true, why should that change anything? It's like he was calling him a murderer at the time, even though it wasn't known, just because it happens to be true. And
maybe he knew.
Maybe, but maybe he didn't. I don't know. Like, is this a personal? Okay, maybe there should be an exception if he really knew him personally. But if he doesn't know, like if he really knew, then what he should do is not go on the internet and make a case. He should go to the police. Anyone who actually wants to make such an accusation, if it's a matter of illegality, he should go through the proper channels to the police. If it's a matter of something that's not illegal, just against taboo of society, then he should mind his own business. Even if it's true, let someone do what he wants if he doesn't want everyone to know about it and he's not doing anything illegal.
But I think you're speaking in terms of what is proper to do. What you, but not only you, but I also would agree.
I think the society should protect people by not allowing this, by not allowing libel for legal reason. If it's libel against, if someone claims someone's doing something illegal, if he doesn't go to the police and instead makes a podcast about it, that should be criminalized, or penalized somehow, even if it turns out to be true, because he's not doing it in the proper way. The people listening aren't necessarily getting an accurate story. There's a court system for a reason. And if it's something that's if it's something that's completely legal, and he's making a podcast about it, then he's just defaming this person's character, and it shouldn't be allowed, and society should protect the person that's being slandered. But that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree.
No, of course. Okay. That's fine.
But getting back to comedy.
Comedy. Okay.
The jokes, the funny stuff. If I go on stage at the Golden Globes and I say, Cal has a small brain, and everyone's laughing, and I just go on an hour, just ranting and just, what's the word, roasting you. Yeah. For no reason.
Yeah.
Even if, let's say it's not even funny.
Let me ask you, you think that should be prosecutable?
If it's past a line, I don't know. If I then go on stage and slap you, if you then go on stage and slap me, then maybe my response or your response shouldn't be prosecuted for assault. Maybe I was provoked.
Maybe
You were
I was provoked.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. If you go into a bar and insult someone's girlfriend's appearance and they punch you, should that guy who punched you be penalized and you not? I think there is totally something in the justice system that's considered provocation.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, which I think does make sense. Yeah.
Okay. Even though it's speech oriented.
Uh,
Provocation.
yeah.
And it wasn't directly threatening.
Yeah, because we're talking about whether the person who punched you is liable now. We're not really talking about whether the speech is censorable or prosecutable.
Well, the idea of the guy punching you not being liable is because it was done in sort of a self-defense way, that you brought it up, that
No.
you did something equally bad to him.
I don't think so.
If it's not,
I think you're imposing that
No, I think-
legal interpretation onto the
okay,
the
maybe
rationale
that's
here.
my interpretation of it. But if we're saying, oh no, the guy should get off scot-free because what you did was, the reason is because what you did was equal to it,
What did I do? The provocation?
the provocation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily that there's nothing in there that necessarily means that the verbal provocation was equal to the retaliatory assault. It's just that our judgment of the person who retaliated with his fists, our judgment of him has been changed based on the situation, and we now say that, you know what, this isn't. Maybe this is fine. Maybe we'll let this go. But it doesn't mean that
But why? Why do we let it go?
because
In any other case, it would be assault.
I understand. It doesn't. It doesn't necessarily mean
And
anything
if
about.
you had punched him first and he punched you back, he would be let off because that would be like equal. That would be the precedent. Because
Wait.
if he assaulted you, you can't assault someone for assaulting you in the first place. So that's why I'm also fine. I'll let you finish, but that's where I'm
It doesn't.
getting this from.
Okay, I didn't. You'll have to repeat that in a second. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about the severity of the verbal provocation. It's simply that, meaning from a legal perspective, it doesn't mean that the verbal provocation was as prosecutable as an unprovoked punch. It's that you didn't just randomly punch somebody. You didn't want to assault this person. You were worked up. You were riled up by the we understand words. Of course we try not to respond to verbal assaults with physical assaults, but it happens sometimes. And so depending on the situation, like if somebody insults your mother and you punch them to the point where you kill them, okay, that's a problem. You're probably going to be charged with manslaughter there. But if you just give them a nice jab to the nose, hopefully they don't even break their nose. You just give them a nice punch. That's just good male conflict or
Okay.
female. That's just good standing up for yourself.
What if you don't kill him, but you beat him to a pulp?
Yeah, that's also
Put
a
him in
problem.
hospital.
That's probably a problem too. Yeah.
So my interpretation of it is it's a matter of, I guess, response and escalation and what's the word?
Proportional response.
Proportional. And the reason why, saying if you punch someone, they punch you back, or if you push someone, they punch you back. Okay, so then there's like, if you punch them in the first place, they punch you back. To me, it seems the guy who did the first punch is in the wrong.
Yeah.
The guy in the second, totally scot-free. That's it. If he pushed you and then he punched you back, if guy A pushes someone, then he gets punched back. Then you have this. Okay, well, he pushed you, which wasn't as bad as punching him, but he did it in the first place. Therefore, like, this kind of equals out, like, both people. I wouldn't necessarily say the first person. It depends on the context, but I would, if I was the judge, I would say you're both in some trouble, but that's it. I want this to be over.
Okay.
So, and then if one person, shoves the other guy, and then the other guy punches him to within an inch of his life, then I'd say, no, the problem here is okay, maybe, there's something, he did push him, but that doesn't mean that he deserves to be punched within an inch of his life. That's too far.
Okay.
As the presiding judge. So in my mind, the verbal provocation is somewhere on that spectrum of physical provocation in a way. It's equivalent in the same way as an initial shove, maybe even a punch, depends what the guy says. Sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not. I don't know. I'm back and forth on this also, depending on the context. That like, if you there's a whole trend a while ago, like punch a Nazi, like someone you think is a Nazi, even.
Yeah.
Then somehow that means that you could just punch them, even if they weren't trying to provoke you or incite you. It's just that's how you saw them identifying. Maybe they said something hateful, but it wasn't targeted at you, and it shouldn't provoke you. Maybe it would provoke the person that they're referring to, but if you're not a member of that, like if you use I don't know. So in that case, I wouldn't necessarily support it. If someone uses the N-word, does that necessarily mean that they deserve to get beaten up?
This actually allegedly happened recently in Cincinnati.
Oh, it happens all the time, yeah. But yes,
well,
like it's a
there was a
classic
story-
trope. But okay, yeah.
There's a story in the recent news in Cincinnati, I think, where, I mean, I don't want to comment too much about it because I don't want to get things wrong, but it seems like there was two people who were severely physically assaulted by a group of black people in Cincinnati, and the black people I heard claimed that one of them said the N-word, which I frankly don't believe at the moment, but based on what I've heard so far. But just in theory, it fits with the example that you're describing. Mm-hmm. Very recently, like a few weeks ago, I think, maybe a month ago.
Right. So I'm not sure where I stand on it because, if for me and probably for other people, and, I'm not black, so maybe I don't realize it, but if someone called me like the K word for a Jewish person, maybe that would warrant a slap, a punch. It depends how they say it. If they're like in my face and they say, "Yeah, you're a K," and and I said, and I punch them back. If they just shout it from far away, I don't think that gives me the right to just chase after them and just beat them to a pulp.
Yeah.
So that's the parallel I make, where I would think that if someone from the other side of the street yelled the N-word, I think that they would get chased and beaten. Even if they weren't saying it in a overly aggressive tone, if they just said it, I think the way it's interpreted, and it has its history, I'm sure, in a way of demeaning black people, and probably goes back to slavery times. So I understand why it has that latent aggressiveness, but still it should maybe depend on, I don't know, the context, and there's a certain magnitude that it's relative to, and what constitutes a response. If it's truly a hate crime, the proper channels are to go to the police and report it. I don't know if they're really going to do anything, but whereas if you're in a bar and someone insults your girlfriend, I don't think there's any proper channels to go to the police and say, "Hey, this guy said something mean about my girlfriend." I don't think there's any precedent for that, actually. So nothing's going to happen, even through the official channel, like even if you recorded it. So,
and it shouldn't. I don't think anything should happen.
Well, I mean, you could say, I don't know if it's lack of imagination, but like, I'm not just saying something. If someone says something generic like, "Oh, your girlfriend's ugly," I'm saying like if they make like a really personal, malicious thing, like, "Oh, hey, I used to I don't know. I know how many guys your girlfriend's been with makes very rude gestures of like there could be a point where that turns into very real harassment that should be prosecutable.
Well, you might be able to press charges and maybe I don't know if it'd be prosecutable in the sense like it's not criminalizable. It's not like we can put this guy in prison. You can
for sure not prison, but penalty. Although
Yeah,
I know that
you can maybe
I
get
am
some-
contradicting myself from what I just said like a minute ago, which was that there are no channels to go through. I meant more
it depends.
like
It depends how
right.
serious and how persistent he is.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there are. It would be harassment, I guess, just to say that hey, to insult someone's girlfriend just
But-
in general.
I think it's very important for the health of a society that there's a lot of things that the social dynamic takes care of, and I think that's necessary because that's like being on the ground. The social rules, the social pressure, the social cues, the social expectations, social etiquette, all that stuff plays a part in keeping things like this rare. And when they do happen, the person is properly ostracized from polite company. You don't need the government stepping in like some interventionist parent kind of meddling with things here. This is one of those things that like if the society is not taking care of it itself, there's a deeper problem going on, and you're probably not going to fix it by the government coming in and creating a new law against harassing people at a bar.
All right.
We still haven't talked about comedy.
Oh, that wasn't.
I feel like we're talking about everything but comedy.
I mean,
Because you're talking about somebody on stage?
We spoke about insulting other religions. We spoke about people roasting other people without their consent, individuals. What are you referring to exactly?
Well, okay. We've been talking a while about someone insulting somebody, but on the streets, not in a comedic set, not in a
We
comedic
also talked about that. Yeah. No, but I was
that's
saying
been-
on stage as well. We spoke about
Okay,
that.
so I wanted to point out that there's also a distinction when you're on stage. When you're a comedian, you get a little more free reign to, even if you're targeting somebody, which of course isn't good and doesn't make for good material, but you get a little more free reign. Certainly if you spread it. If you're going after somebody the whole time, your hour show is only roasting one particular individual. I mean, I still think there's no free speech issue here. I don't think, but there is something called I just looked it up on Wikipedia: incitement to suicide, as opposed to incitement to violence, that has legal precedence. So harassing,
cyberbullying.
yeah, like targeted cyberbullying, harassments to the point where they commit suicide. But of course, it has to be more specific to that. I think you yourself have to kind of encourage suicide in the person in order for this to be a thing. But
And they have to somehow prove that this person didn't have any tendency towards suicidal thoughts beforehand.
yeah, probably. Yeah, it's very complicated, I'm sure. But there is legal
Like,
precedent.
just because, a joke to someone, to one person could be taken easily, to the other person, the same exact joke could drive him to suicide because he's not healthy or something.
Of course. Yeah, that's why all this stuff has to be, you have to study all of the details of the case in its entirety. But
And it's still subjective at some point. Even if you have you have to make a judgment call at the end of the day if these satisfy your standards of, yes, this person did kill someone because of this speech. Yes, he wasn't going to do it unless you said this. Yes, it did lead to something harmful. Yes, there's a direct correlation,
yeah,
and so forth.
I get it. I mean, yeah, like at the end of the day, I think jury decisions, there's an element of subjectivity all the time because you could always kind of argue for some defense, right? There's very seldom a case where it's just like we are prosecuting this person for committing the murder. The defense is that he didn't. Well, that's tough because sometimes the defense is that he did not commit it, but usually the defense is not that he didn't do the crime. It's that he did the crime, but there were extenuating circumstances. It wasn't as bad as it seemed. There was a reason he did it. From his perspective, He wasn't acting in malice, that sort of thing. That's generally the defense when it comes to criminal cases. And of course, you're always going to have issues of subjectivity here. We do the best we can.
Right. Back to comedy. I did hear someone say once, if it's funny, then it's not problematic. So it's not a matter of whether it's actually offensive or not. It could be super offensive, but funny, in which case, everyone should let it go. Nothing wrong, nothing, you should, a healthy society respects that. If it's not funny, if he's just droning on and just roasting someone, no one's laughing, then it is more of a problem. So we should make we did make a distinction from the beginning between legality versus just response to, offended response, backlash to something. We spoke a lot about that. Maybe, and we tried to keep it as clear as possible. Whenever we're talking about shouldn't, we would qualify whether we're talking about, criminal penalties versus a healthy society's pushback. So we tried to stick to that. But I think a lot of times when this topic is discussed in the media throughout, they don't stick to that definition a lot. It's not brought up enough as it should.
Oh, definitely.
It's always like, oh, yeah, we should be allowed to. No, we shouldn't be allowed to. But in what context are you talking about? What do you mean should?
Right. Wait, we're done with the it needs to be funny point?
Unless you want to add to that.
Yeah,
But,
it depends what we mean by it's funny.
which is, the problem is it's subjective whether it's funny, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that funny is subjective, but what I mean is that it needs to be funny to the person you're insulting as well. It can't just be funny to other people. I assume that that's what that person meant. I assume it's okay to make fun of Jews as long as the Jews are laughing with you. It's okay to make fun of blacks as long as the blacks are laughing with you. That actually makes some sense to me. If it's funny because other people are laughing, but the people who are the target of the particular joke are not laughing, that doesn't strike me as I now don't see the wisdom in this person's statement.
Mm-hmm. And how do you guarantee that sort of thing? Or do you make the joke and then apologize after? Or good comedians are smart. They have an idea of how their jokes will fall. A lot of them, even the best comedians have fallen flat with their routines sometimes and have jokes that fall.
Yeah.
Do you think that they should ask the person they're making the joke about beforehand? Is that really the only way to guarantee it?
No, I don't think so.
So what happens when they make a joke and then they don't laugh?
But again, we're jumping into none of this really matters because I don't think any of this is. If you make fun of somebody and they don't laugh, we're talking about what is good, not what is legal. From a legal perspective, anything is.
Yeah. So free speech, what I said, it's two big topics, whether legal or not, and as a society. So right now, I'm talking about as a society.
Yeah. But what does it matter? So you made a mistake. It's not as if anyone's going to prosecute you for it. You have to ask them before.
So you should apologize.
If you try to make a joke in good taste and the people that you're joking about didn't like it, should you apologize? Maybe. It's a judgment call. It's not as there aren't rules here. Like the only rule is does free speech protect it? The answer is yes. Now, when it comes to what's in good taste, it's in better taste if you make a joke about Jews that Jews also will appreciate. That's what is in better taste, or any group of people. Now, sometimes you'll fail. And that's the risk. And should you apologize? I don't know. I think it depends on what you mean by apologize. I don't think you should bend over and say, I'm sorry, I did something very wrong. Particularly if people are trying to cancel you and giving you a really hard time about it. You might just say listen, that didn't go over the way I intended. You might offer a clarifying statement. You might say, this is what I was trying to get across. I wasn't trying to say this offensive thing that some people have interpreted. Something like that. You might try to clarify your position, or maybe you'll apologize if you feel you did something wrong, not if you just feel that you failed in executing a joke to its best potential.
What if the offended party demands an apology and you don't feel?
I don't care if people demand an apology. If you don't feel you did something wrong, don't apologize.
Okay, so specifically the case of Chris Rock at the
Nice.
Well, that's sort of what we've been alluding to this whole time, I thought. But,
Maybe.
okay, sure. He made the joke about his Will Smith's wife being bald.
Yeah.
Now, on the one hand, we have, the case of where you're in a bar and someone says your girlfriend's, says something rude about your girlfriend, and then he gets punched. And we said, maybe that's the healthiest way to deal with it. On the other hand, we said...
I don't think we said maybe that's the healthiest way to deal with it.
He said...
I never said that.
Alluded to something about this is, men, women, this is how we get it out, there's frustration.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It could be. Yeah. Depends on the situation. You're right.
Okay.
I did say that.
So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, we just said, okay, this is a case where clearly, Will Smith was not amused. He did not find it funny. Mm-hmm. It fell flat. Mm-hmm. So
First of all, he did find it funny. He laughed at the
there
joke.
was and then he saw his wife's expression.
Yeah,
that she
yeah.
was
He found
unhappy.
Will Smith found it funny.
Mm-hmm. So let's just assume he did not find it funny and was offended from the outset.
Okay.
Now, I would venture to assume, well, maybe I shouldn't. I'll let you decide what should have gone down and what shouldn't have. I'm just saying, there are different, it's a judgment call, and yes, we're just talking about this specific thing. I assume, I don't know, some days I feel like, yeah, you know what, Will Smith felt offended. He felt that his wife's honor was besmirched in front of billions of people, and he wanted to really emphasize that what Chris Rock was saying was crossed the line, and going over afterwards and saying, hey, dude, that wasn't right, just wouldn't have the same effect. Maybe, I don't think it's really true that people would have looked down on Will Smith anymore because of this joke, but let's say it was, then, it wouldn't have had the same message if you just asked him afterwards to apologize. That's pretty lame to go to a comedian and say, like, can you apologize for that? I don't know. They're supposed to be friends. Apparently, they weren't. Ideally, yes. How it should have gone down was afterwards he should have gone over, and then Chris should have apologized to him because he was offended and hurt. And it was a mean thing to say. I don't know if it was really that funny at all. He was just making fun of a woman for being bald, which is a very sensitive issue for women, especially. Sensitive issue for men, but even worse for women. I know if I was in that scenario, I'd want to slap Chris Rock.
All right, I'm a little surprised at your take on this. I disagree. There's no justification for Will Smith going on stage and slapping Chris Rock. And also, the ideal scenario is not for him to afterwards demand an apology from Chris Rock. The ideal scenario is for him to just shrug it off. Like, also, what's his wife's name again? Jada
Pinkett Smith.
Jada
Pinkett Smith.
So yeah, also Jada should have just shrugged it off. Like, as far as jokes go, it was really quite mild. I'm not saying it was funny. It was like a chuckle funny. It was like a
The joke was G.I. Jane.
Yeah,
because
G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it.
because infantrymen are bald because they shave their heads.
Well, G.I. Jane, it's not G.I. Joe, it's G.I. Jane, which was a movie with Demi Moore, who shaved her. Yes, it is because infantrymen are bald, yes, but it was a woman who played.
I didn't know that there was an actual movie, G.I. Jane. Okay.
Yeah, because the joke is G.I. Jane 2. So there's an actual G.I. Jane with Demi Moore where she shaves her head and joins the army. That's all I know. I've never seen the movie. I don't know anything about this movie.
I've seen V for Vendetta.
Oh, yes, where Natalie Portman has a shaved head. That wouldn't have landed as well because Natalie Portman is not as much the face of V for Vendetta as G.I. Jane is the face of G.I. Jane. So it was like haha funny. It wasn't a laugh out loud funny. But as far as like offenses go, it's extraordinarily mild as far as jokes go. As far as jokes that have been told about people, about celebrities, about jokes that have been told at these awards events. I'm thinking back to one of the jokes that Ricky Gervais told about James Corden. James Corden, that's his name, right? At I think the Golden Globes, where he's like, yeah, James Corden was a big fat pussy, and he was also in the movie Cats. like that sort of thing. Like that's so much more offensive than.
Is it? I don't think so, because what does it even mean that he's a big fat pussy? That doesn't.
I mean,
like, clearly that's
like an actual
hyperbole.
insult. Yeah, but it's an actual. You're actually
it's
insulting a guy.
No, it's not. That's just calling him some generic insult. It's like how when you say,
Meaning it's not real
"You're a
enough.
son of a bitch."
It's not real enough.
Yeah, it
It
doesn't.
doesn't point to anything real.
There is a thing in different cultures, sure, that when you call them like a son of a bitch, or then they say, "Wait, you're insulting my mother," or if you call them a mf'er, they're saying, "Wait a second, you've besmirched my honor." And like, I don't know, in the Western world, I'm pretty sure they're just words that people say without any intent on the meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
So when he calls him a big fat pussy, he's not trying to actually he's not saying something like trying to really dig
Yeah.
into him.
I get it.
Whereas this is I don't think James Corden is self-conscious about him being a coward. He skydived out of a plane with Tom Cruise and screamed the whole time.
Okay.
He's fat. He knows this. He makes jokes about himself being fat all the time. Will Smith
Well,
does
so
not make.
that is one thing that is real about him. So that could have been taken. He could have taken offense to. I get.
Will Smith, clearly this was a sensitive issue that they never poke fun at themselves about or something.
It's okay. I don't know this idea
What
that
if she had cancer and he made fun of her for having cancer?
that would have been in poor taste. But still,
Why?
uh,
Because she's really dying from it, as
it's
opposed
good. It's a good
to-
question. She has some sickness that's.
It's just, I think it's just alopecia so it's not due to cancer.
It's due to.
To the same thing that males get when they go bald, sometimes it affects women.
Okay. Yeah. If it was cancer, it would be in not as good taste. I'm still not sure it would even be
Would
that.
he-
I actually don't think it would even be that bad, even if it was cancer,
Really?
because it was just you're not.
I would totally slap him if he made fun of my dying wife.
No way.
That's
It's such a mild. Not only mild. It's not an offensive joke. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see
no,
it.
but we're talking about cancer. Let's say
Because it's not
what's,
mentioning the cancer. It's not mentioning the disease. It's not even saying you look
The
ugly.
Fault in Our Stars or something.
Okay.
I don't know. That's the only cancer death movie I could think of right now.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of others.
Yeah.
But if he made a joke saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see her in The Fault in Our Stars" or something.
Oh yeah,
or-
that would be much worse.
But why? I don't know.
Why? Are you kidding? Because the
She'd
G.I. Jane
be a
2.
great sequel for this movie, or for The Fault in Our Stars, because she's dying of cancer.
That's much worse. That's
Why?
in much poorer taste. And that too wouldn't warrant going on stage and slapping the man. That would just warrant not laughing, kind of making clear, okay, you didn't think that was funny. You know the camera's going to go on you the moment that joke is made. Just kind of be like, and that's going to go on social media. It's going to be like, Will Smith did not find that funny. And probably people are going to be like, yeah, that was in poor taste, Chris Rock. You win right there just by giving a kind of subtle, that was not funny. But don't go on the stage and slap the guy, even if it's a joke about cancer. But let's talk about the G.I. Jane joke. Because the G.I. Jane joke,
I'd still slap him for cancer, yeah. Okay, yeah.
the G.I. Jane joke, it's not even a joke about, it's not saying you look ugly. It's not saying you're dying, you have some
It's definitely
disease.
implying that
No,
she looks...
it's literally the entire joke is you look like Demi Moore from G.I. Jane, and maybe Demi Moore looks great in G.I. Jane. It's literally just striking this comparison. It's like G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. It's such a simple, mild, inoffensive joke that doesn't even mean anything. It's literally just oh haha, yeah, nice, you made that connection. It's just so inoffensive. It's just
I think you'd have to actually talk to women and to really understand how sensitive they are about their hair. But
okay, again, it just doesn't. When you're in a public space, when a comedian is on stage, there's a standard that is there's a kind of an objective standard that gets played here. It really doesn't matter how many negative feelings you hold about the fact that you are losing your hair. It really doesn't matter any of that. The question is, from a public standard perspective, in this setting, was this an offensive joke? The answer is no. It was like, okay, people can have unique chords that get struck. People can be uniquely offended by particular things. People can care about, their appearance. But there are plenty of women, I think, that would have laughed that off. There are women in Hollywood, oh man, the things that they put up with, and some of them are very professional about it. And of course, some things that have happened to women in Hollywood shouldn't be put up with. But certainly when it comes to jokes being made about them, a lot of women actresses and professionals would laugh that off big time.
Like
and
jokes about their appearance.
It would be easy for them. Yeah.
All right. When I just want to clarify one last thing, because we didn't really touch on cancel culture so much, but I seem to recall in the past, we also really didn't talk about discrimination when it comes to free speech. The classic case of the gay wedding cake, but we've talked about that in previous episodes. When it comes to cancel culture, I seem to recall you being against such things. Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the way it was played out in recent years. Yeah,
Right.
go on.
Even so, probably because it stifles free speech, but yet it doesn't criminalize speech. It just is society and public opinion coming together to, in a sense, excommunicate someone. Mm-hmm. And that sounds something, according to what you've been saying, I would think is more in line with something that you would agree with, because you said, it's very important that the public come to the conclusion about whether something is wrong or not, and the power of the public is important, and we shouldn't penalize, we shouldn't use the power of law, but, it sounds like cancel culture would be something that would be a good, mechanism.
We have to start with, it obviously depends what is being canceled, who's being canceled, and what they're being canceled for. That's the first step with anything, right?
But it should be applied across the board, right wing, left wing. It should be consistent.
It should be warranted. It should be justified. It should be, and even when it is warranted, there's usually better ways to do it than the cancel culture that we were seeing in recent years. This sort of like vicious, predatory, definitely mob-like, just this predatory mission to take down people, to ensure that these people are buried in the dirt, that they're unemployable, that their name is in complete disrepute. Just this vicious power play by people that I don't think it has any place. I think even if what the person said or did is warrants a sort of social excommunication or certain social consequences, a certain demotion in polite society. The vicious Twitter mobs that we've seen in recent years, I don't think have any place. It comes down to a number of things. It comes down to what are they being canceled for, and what is the canceling going on. The cancel culture as a term generally refers to this unhealthy use of the mob, and it's not even really society. I think most people didn't care, or were very okay with a lot of the things that people got canceled for. And it's sort of this very vocal minority that is adamant on just, my mission today is to make myself feel better, make myself feel superior by showing that somebody else is terrible. Right? Finding somebody to, it's like a witch hunt, right? Finding somebody to burn as a witch. All of that, super unhealthy, super disgusting, frankly. And generally for things that are just like so stupid, like why is this is not even a big deal. So yeah, obviously it's good that a society corrects itself, has a self-correction process when somebody does things that are not good, really says things that are improper with malintent. But still, there needs to be forgiveness. There needs to be grace. We need to actually think about whether, try to judge favorably. But yeah, sometimes it is necessary to use our influence as people, as a group of people, as a majority, use our influence to kind of create social consequences for certain actions. It's warranted sometimes, but that's not even cancel culture. I think I wouldn't even call it canceling. It still needs to be done with grace and with mercy. So yeah, that's what I have to say about cancel culture. Is that fair?
I think there's some things that I agree with. Like it sounds like you're saying it's a matter of how far you're going, whether there's a component of mercy and forgiveness, and how vicious you're going about it. Still think that there's always going to be this component of subjectivity. One person might view the same case as really warranting it because what they said was actually very harmful, detrimental, dangerous. Mm-hmm. The other might not, and they might say, like they might not view that the person ever did regret what they did. I mean, you said no one should ever apologize
unless you did something wrong.
Well, you said unless you believe you did something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference exactly? You got to be honest with yourself, and you got to be open to maybe being persuaded that you did do something wrong. But if you try to look at what you did, and you know yourself, and you take a good, honest look at the situation, and you don't think you did something wrong, then don't apologize.
Right. I mean, so yeah, I mean, the component of mercy really applies only when you actually feel you did something wrong. If you're going to apologize, I do think, and I don't know what this really implies, but there's an aspect of never apologize, because the way humans are, it's just that if you apologize, people see that as weakness. They think, oh, you are admitting you did something wrong. We got you. Versus doubling down is sometimes the smarter play, and people will respect you more for that. So
I actually agree, sort of. I actually should amend my statement. Never apologize to the Twitter mob. The people who come after you, who start calling you all sorts of names, racist, bigot, whatever, and they demand the apology. Never apologize to those people. Those people, you have to stand up to those people.
But you said one of the issues with cancel culture is there's no forgiveness. But how could there be no forgiveness if you should never apologize?
You should apologize to the person that you wronged, or to the people that you wronged. A good example is like Morgan Wallen. There's that Morgan Wallen kind of got semi-canceled for a bit there, where he came back late from a party and he came out of a car in a neighborhood late at night and he was saying some racial slurs, and some of the neighbors overheard him. Even that, which obviously wasn't good behavior, but even that, don't apologize to the Twitter mob, right? Everyone who was going after him, they don't care about your apology. Like, they don't care. Like,
should he apologize to the entire group of people that he, ethnic group of people that he racially spoke about?
I was thinking maybe apologize just to the neighbors who were disturbed. The neighbors who, you made noise late at night in this neighborhood, the neighbors who heard you, who were a little bit disturbed by your language.
Were they themselves?
I don't even think it matters.
So I don't think that. I don't know. I don't know this case, but it sounds like it wasn't really about the disturbance late at night that was the issue. It was the racial slurs that were the issue.
I mean, I think if you say racial slurs in the privacy of your, if you say racial slurs, and you're drunk late at night and you just start saying some racial slurs, but you're not saying it to anybody in particular, I don't know. Do you need to apologize for that? I'm not sure. I don't think that's a big deal.
I mean, according to what I said, people should be allowed to do. I'm big on, if you didn't intend for anyone to hear it or see it, and someone went out of their way to film you, then it's not your problem.
Yeah.
Or your fault.
That's the other thing. It's so people are so opportunistic, and people, right, they pull out their phone and they film you. It's like now they got something on you and they spread it. It's like people use this for their own self-aggrandizement and their own weird, warped desire to take people down. It's like, never apologize to these people. Like, fine, if you disturb your neighbor, maybe apologize to the neighbor. Maybe offer a clarifying statement on your social media saying, like, I'm embarrassed by, the thing that came out, and I was saying language that I don't really believe in, and maybe apologize to the black community. Maybe. It depends on the situation. Maybe in Morgan Wallen's situation, maybe that was a little warranted. But I don't think anyone who's black, first of all, like, I don't think anyone who's black was like, oh my gosh, Morgan Wallen said racial slurs. This affects me. Like, this ruins my day. Like, they're actually thinking about this. Like, I don't think anybody actually feels that way. I think people just use this as an opportunity to jump on people, to stomp on people, to take people down. Because, like, hey, you said the thing that we all agree is wrong, so I'm gonna use that against you. But no one was actually bothered by it. Like, no one was actually offended.
I mean, you said they do it for their own, like, what's it called? Virtue signaling or...
Self-aggrandizement.
Yeah, there's another more contemporary word for it, clout, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe now it's aura farming or something.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just confusing my terminology, but I would venture to say that's how you see it. A lot of them see themselves as social justice warriors. They think that they're doing, if you ask them, they're obviously not going to say they're doing this to virtue signal, but they think that themselves that they're doing the world a favor. They think that they're getting rid of, speech that is derogatory and hurtful to others. And this is their, I'm not, obviously you don't see it like that. I'm just saying they see it.
It's not only that I don't see it. Like, this
as the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's this false equivalency of perspective here. I have a much higher perspective than these people if they think that what they're doing is good. They have no evidence to show that what they're doing is good. There's tons of evidence to show that what they're doing is harmful. They're ruining people's lives. They're contributing to toxicity in society. They can tell themselves all they want that they are doing some great service, some heroic cleansing of hatred in society, that they're saving society in some way. They can tell that the worst people in history have told themselves things like this. There's no equivalency. I reject this equivalency of well, this is how they feel, this is how you feel. No, like, I am the mature person in this situation. They are the wrong people in this situation.
Well, I would say that decades ago, it was the people saying all these problematic things that were the toxic ones. Mm-hmm. That it was much more of a widespread issue about racial slurs when they were actually used to put down other people. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's not as much an issue, and so the tide has turned a bit. Now that they're actually able to call people out, the only reason they're able to do that is because society has changed so much so that in general we all view that type of talk as wrong and incorrect. So that's the only reason. Like, in a weird way, maybe like at the tipping point, what they were doing would be allowed, right when, not just allowed, but like a good thing to do, a valiant thing to do to take down the toxic racists. But now that racism isn't an issue, they're overcompensating. The fact that they're able to do it is because it's not such an issue today. And most of the time when people make such racist remarks, they don't actually pose a threat, a real threat, in the same way that they used to, and it's overblown.
I hear what you're saying, sort of. I mean, it's important to remember, like, when did the Civil War start? 1861. That was close to 200 years ago, 160 years ago. 160 years ago, more than half the country supported a war to abolish slavery. More than half the country stood firmly against enslaving black people. More than half the states in the country had already abolished slavery. This was 160 years ago, right? This was right. We're talking ages ago.
And then segregation, Jim Crow laws were abolished in the
1960s.
60s.
But those as well. Those were primarily in the South. Much of the country had already didn't have laws like that. Didn't have segregation. Even before the 1960s. Right, Martin Luther King Jr. was instrumental in making sure that it was abolished everywhere. Right, any state, any state that a southern state, a previous slave state, right, and they were victorious in doing this. Right, it's important to remember that even when this was happening, it wasn't happening in most of the country, and most of the country stood against it. And there was a successful movement to eradicate it. First slavery and then Jim Crow, everywhere, right? Not just in one state, not just in half the country, but everywhere in the entire country. Right? It's honestly difficult for me to picture a time in American history where racism was so prevalent throughout the country, and not just in particular places, that anyone who says anything while drunk, late at night, after coming home from a party, anyone that says anything that could be construed as a racial slur must immediately be ostracized, be excommunicated. We must immediately assume the worst about this person because of how dangerous racism is right now. There's always danger, right? But it's for the sake of goodness between people, for the sake of justice. You always have to judge favorably, or at least you're right. Depending on the situation, right? You can be cautious, you can whatever, but to have this instinct of stomping on somebody, to have this instinct, this predatorial instinct, this vulture-like instinct of as soon as somebody says something that's against the cultural ethic, the cultural norm, I'm going to demand this person's head, whether it's in the town square, whether it's with a torch, whether it's on social media, whatever it is. To have that instinct, that's never been a healthy instinct. I don't care what time period we put ourselves in. I think the people who fought against slavery and fought against civil rights were not people like this. They were much more level-headed about it, and that level-headedness is not a lack of conviction for what is right. It's a greater moral fiber than the people that I've seen who engage in this sort of cancel culture thing. I think that those people would have been on the opposite side back in the day. I think these people, I think so little of these people. I think they're only on the side of stomping on people who say something problematic now because they know that that's the easy side to be on. I think back in the day, if racism was more prevalent, they might have been on the opposite side. They would have been on the side that was convenient to them. I just don't see that there's any real moral strength in these people.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that you think very little of them.
Okay.
I don't know if if the poison got through the microphone to our listeners.
Yeah.
But we could tell which side his bread is buttered on. All right. Do you have any concluding remarks to take us away? Some uplifting quotes or statements?
There's so much more.
So much more.
There's so much more.
But I think we're at our usual cutoff time when we start to get, at least I'm drowsy now. I think Cal's just getting started.
I hear you.
Usually I'm the one who's, ready to go on for a little longer. But
Yeah.
So any concluding remarks, I guess, that
Sure.
to carry us into the week, I guess, the rest of the week, whenever this is released.
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to get into maybe a kind of a philosophical or spiritual foundation of free speech, which I believe in. I think that in each of us is a sort of in human beings there's great potential for destruction as well as great potential for good action and for moral strength and for constructive action, for building the world. And part of building the world is analyzing it, is observing it, is being honest in our perspective, and processing all that information that comes in, and using that information for the betterment of the world, for the betterment of people. And this is something that we're all called upon to do, and it's a power that we all have. And when you suppress free speech, and of course we've talked about how there are scenarios where free speech shouldn't be a justification, where not all speech is protected, but we need to be wary of a tendency toward suppression, a tendency toward this sense that we need to have less speech and not more because speech is dangerous, or we're afraid of what people might say, we're afraid of what information might get out there. When we do that, we don't believe in ourselves, and we don't believe in that constructive spirit that we have. And free speech is about allowing that spirit to flourish, because when you allow people to be free, when you allow people to analyze the world freely and come to their conclusions, the truth will overcome the lies. And when we all take on that mantle of needing to interact with the world in an honest and constructive way and arrive at the truth, because the truth is so necessary, it's necessary for the salvation of our society and of our species, then we'll get there. And we have to get there. You can't outsource this to the government. You can't say, "Oh, we're going to open some department of what's that department that Joe Biden opened? It was supposed to government Department of Misinformation." Right, we're going to open some Department of Misinformation.
I thought you were going to say the department from 1984, which is like
yeah. I mean, people.
What's it called? Free speak or something.
Was the
double speak?
Oh, double speak is of course the term for all for the things that mean one thing but are used in a different way.
The Department of Propaganda or something. I think it was
The Ministry
explicitly
in 1984 it was the Ministry of Truth.
Oh, the Ministry of Truth. Yeah. That would have been great if you called it.
If they called it the Ministry of Truth. I mean, he basically almost called it the Ministry of Truth, calling it the Department of Misinformation or something like that. Anyway, like the idea that we would outsource this fundamental responsibility that each of us have to the government and trust the government to do this for us, and then we would stop doing it ourselves. That is the beginning of the end. That I think is when a society has lost itself. So believe in your constructive spirit and channel your constructive spirit. Don't listen to the lies. Find the truth, and that's what we all have to do. And that's why speech needs to remain free, so that we can all do that together and arrive at a collective understanding of the world that isn't fettered or corrupted or contaminated by a authoritarian intervention into this process.
Amen. And a woman.
And a woman, yeah. Nice. What's your concluding remark, Benji, if you have one?
I was just going to go with what you said, because you made it sound pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm pretty tired.
Okay.
And I hope my stance on everything kind of came throughout the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just go back on it and say, free speech, it's critical. We have all of these stories through parables, not just but all of these historical instances of despotic, if that's the word, governments, and the way that they had control over their citizens was by suppressing their right to criticism and saying things that went against the grain, and that's why free speech is so important. We can't risk falling back into those dark ages, being like all these countries around the world. That really the critical difference is that where whether you are allowed to criticize the government or not, whether you do have these freedoms of speech. There still are latent issues with harmful, violent, insightful speech that I still think is very problematic, especially when it comes to terrorism, enemies of the West and fundamental values, letting them have a platform, letting them speak, even if they're not so explicit in their language. It's when it's clear what they want to do, you got to believe them. You gotta really think about the big picture here. And I realize where that leaves us. It leaves us in a situation where everyone kind of decides for himself whether what someone is saying is harmful or not, and then makes a further mess of things. But I believe, like you said, through debate, through communication, through knowledge sharing, we can hopefully arrive at better judgment calls of what is harmful and what's not. Because the alternative is just everyone yelling at each other on the news, in the media, which is pretty much what we see all the time. That's what people want to see. It's an unfortunate state of the world, but open communication is hopefully the key to it all, as long as you're not trying to really harm other people that don't pose a threat, which, takes us back to square one. I don't know. Hopefully we use it wisely.
Yeah.
Free speech, that is.
Right.
All right.
Good. We have stated our opinions. We have engaged in discourse.
And we are the better for it.
We are.
All right. Thank you for listening.
Thank you if you've gotten this far.
Yeah.
We love you if you've really gotten this far.
Yes.
One of our few.
You'll get a shout out on the next episode if you leave a comment and say, I got this far.
Well, we have to say some secret word right now.
Right.
If you know the secret word.
You have to write
Nitrogen.
free speech backward.
Okay.
Oh, fine. List the instructions for constructing a bomb.
Whoa,
on YouTube.
whoa, oh my gosh. No.
That's a reference to Fight Club.
Yes.
But
Yes, write free speech backwards.
write free speech backwards. You'll get a shout out no matter who you are. Some random person on the internet.
Yeah.
All right. This has been the Benji Cow Podcast.
Good night.